The wind howled across the jagged peaks of the Ötzi Alps, slicing through layers of snow and ice like a blade. The mountains had always been majestic, silent sentinels over the valleys below, but in that frigid dawn, they seemed almost alive, as if they were holding their breath. Somewhere high above the treeline, where the air grew thin and every step threatened to slip into an abyss, the frozen silence was broken by a discovery that would shake the world. Two hikers, bundled against the chill, were tracing the rocky paths, laughing at the crisp air, their boots crunching over frost-encrusted stones. It was routine, ordinary even, until the glint of copper caught their eyes. At first, it seemed like an abandoned piece of modern debris. But as they approached, unease crept in, replacing curiosity. The object was lodged in ice, perfectly preserved, untouched by time. And then they saw him, a figure, lying face down, half buried in the glacier, his body locked in eternal stillness. At first, they thought it might be a climber lost to the mountain, a tragedy recent and raw. But the deeper they peered, the more impossible it seemed. His skin, darkened yet remarkably intact, was like leather stretched over frozen bones. His hair, matted and brittle, framed a face that had long since been claimed by death. Yet his expression was frozen in something uncanny. Fear, pain, maybe realization of an impending end. It was a face that could have belonged to any man, yet it belonged to no one they had ever known. The air seemed to thicken. The wind quieted as if the mountain itself was watching. This was not just a body. It was a time capsule. The glacier had become a tomb, holding him in icy stasis for thousands of years, shielding him from decay, from the ravages of nature and humanity alike. Every inch of his preserved form was a silent witness to a story that had begun long before modern maps, before roads carved through the Alps, before the world outside had even imagined what lay hidden in the ice. The hikers instinctively called the authorities, but even as they waited, they could not shake the feeling that this was more than a discovery. It was a message from the past, sent across millennia, waiting for someone brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to listen. News spread like wildfire. Scientists, journalists, and historians descended upon the scene, climbing the glaciers with precision and care. The world watched, riveted, as layers of ice were carefully chipped away, revealing not only the body but the tools, the garments, the copper-tipped axe that had survived the centuries alongside him. Every item was a whisper from a forgotten world, a puzzle piece in a story humanity had never fully known. And the more they uncovered, the deeper the mystery grew. How had he ended up there? Was he a hunter, a wanderer, a warrior, or a victim of something far more sinister? The wind returned, harsher now, sweeping through the Alps as if eager to reclaim its secrets. Researchers took photos, measurements, and samples, but even their modern technology seemed inadequate in the face of such preservation. Here was a man who had died more than 5,000 years ago, yet his story was more vivid, more immediate than some tales of yesterday. His clothes were intact, his shoes worn but functional, his quiver still holding arrows. On his body, dark, patterned marks traced across his skin. Not decorative, the scientists realized, but deliberate. Tattoos, yes, but also maps of pain, of ritual, of endurance. They spoke of a culture lost to time, of traditions unrecorded in books, of lives that had been erased by snow and frost. Even the elements seemed complicit in his preservation. The ice had not merely frozen him. It had enveloped him in a cocoon, keeping predators and bacteria at bay, keeping his story suspended until this very moment. It was almost as if the mountain had waited for humanity to be ready, for us to look up and finally recognize that history is not only written in stone and parchment but also in flesh, in the subtle clues left behind by those who walked the earth long before us. But the most haunting part was his eyes, or rather, the absence of them, replaced by empty sockets that somehow seemed to hold more than they lost. It was a reminder of mortality, yes, but also a challenge. To see what he saw, to understand the world he knew, to walk a mile in boots that had long since turned to dust. People began speculating, theorizing, and imagining the last moments of his life. Some whispered that he had been fleeing, pursued by enemies invisible to modern eyes. Others suggested a ritual gone wrong, a sacrifice offered to gods we no longer remember. Every theory carried weight, every guess felt plausible. And yet, the truth remained locked in the glacier, a silent testament to human fragility and endurance alike. As the sun rose over the peaks, painting the ice in hues of gold and rose, the man seemed almost to breathe in the light, a phantom awakening. The wind shifted again, and for a moment, there was a sense that history itself had paused to observe. In that stillness, one question became impossible to ignore. What secrets had been carried to this icy grave, and why had the mountains kept them hidden for so long? The hikers, now long gone, would never forget the glint of copper in the morning sun. The scientists, poring over the first fragments of evidence, knew they were standing at the threshold of something extraordinary. And the world beyond, thousands of miles away, waited, eager for answers that were more elusive than anyone could have imagined. This was more than a discovery. It was an invitation to peer into the frozen heart of history and confront mysteries that had endured beyond human memory. And somewhere in the ice, the man waited, not merely as a relic of the past, but as a messenger from a time we could scarcely comprehend. The glacier had given up its secret, but the story was far from complete. As researchers examined the man frozen in ice, they realized he was not an anomaly. He was part of a silent network of preserved lives scattered across the coldest regions of the earth. These ice mummies, as they would come to be called, were time capsules, human beings trapped in frost, each carrying fragments of history, waiting for modern eyes to unlock their mysteries. From the Alps to Siberia, from Greenland to the high Andes, bodies had been preserved by accident, ritual, or some cruel twist of nature, yet all told the same chilling truth, that life, when caught by ice, could last long beyond imagination. Across laboratories and mountain ranges, experts compared notes. The patterns were astonishing. These were not casual deaths. The conditions that led to their preservation often involved extreme environments, isolated regions, and moments of intense human drama. Some had perished during hunts, others in conflict, and a few, it seemed, had been deliberately placed in the ice as part of rituals lost to memory. The very idea that the Earth itself could act as a guardian of history sent shivers through the scientific community. Here, in the frozen stillness, lay details of civilizations that had vanished without leaving a single written record, civilizations whose names were now whispers, their stories written not on parchment, but on skin, in tools, in the pollen trapped in their stomachs. The Iceman of the Alps, Ötzi, was the first of these discoveries to capture the public imagination. Unearthed almost by accident, he revealed a level of detail about life over 5,000 years ago that had been previously unimaginable. Researchers could trace his diet, his travels, even his health, with astonishing precision. His stomach alone became a window into the past, containing remnants of meals, pollen, and microbe traces that told of landscapes and seasons long gone. But Ötzi was only the beginning. Across continents, similar finds began to emerge. Siberian hunters found frozen bodies buried in permafrost, their eyes still open, their teeth intact, their tools neatly arranged beside them. In Greenland, ice-preserved remains of men and women hinted at harsh voyages, desperate survival, and sometimes violence. What made these discoveries extraordinary was not just preservation, but the intimate detail they offered. Clothing and tools told stories of technology, trade, and social structure. Weapons hinted at territorial disputes and hunting practices. Even the smallest artifacts, flints, beads, or fragments of woven fabric, provided clues about human ingenuity and culture. Every frozen body, no matter how ancient or remote, was a link between modern humanity and the world as it existed thousands of years ago. It was as if the ice had been waiting patiently for someone to notice, to piece together the fragments of forgotten lives. Yet there was something more unsettling. Each discovery carried an aura of mystery, a suggestion that these deaths were not merely accidents of time. In Ötzi's case, a deep wound from an arrow and the bruises across his body suggested he had died violently, a victim of human hands. In Siberia, some frozen bodies bore signs of strangulation or blunt trauma. Even in Greenland, The positioning of certain bodies indicated ritualized death or deliberate placement. The ice, it seemed, was more than a preservative. It was a witness to human behavior, a silent recorder of our choices, our conflicts, and sometimes our cruelty. As the story of Ötzi spread, it changed not only the field of archaeology but also the way the world viewed the past. People no longer imagined ancient humans as distant, primitive shadows. These ice-preserved bodies reminded them that humanity was constant, that we shared the same vulnerabilities, fears, and struggles as those who walked before us. And yet, for every piece of evidence, a question lingered. Why did so many perish in ice? And what did it mean that the Earth itself had become a vault for their secrets? Modern science brought answers but also deeper enigmas. Techniques like radiocarbon dating, DNA sequencing, and isotopic analysis revealed the age, diet, ancestry, and even the diseases of these long-dead individuals. Researchers could trace migrations, familial connections, and trade routes, mapping human history with unprecedented clarity. But the more they learned, the more questions arose. Some of the pollen in Ötzi's stomach suggested he had traveled through regions previously thought inaccessible for his era. Some of the injuries on Siberian mummies hinted at conflicts unknown to historians. And in every case, there was an unmistakable intimacy. These were not anonymous figures. They were individuals, alive in their moments, whose lives had intersected with climate, culture, and chance in ways that modern humanity could barely comprehend. The frozen bodies also sparked philosophical and ethical debates. How much could or should we reveal about lives that had been preserved by accident or design? Was it enough to study them scientifically, or did touching their flesh and peering into their personal histories carry a moral responsibility? The ice seemed indifferent, yet in the process of unearthing these individuals, humanity was forced to confront its own curiosity, its reverence for knowledge, and its inevitable intrusion into the past. And so, the ice mummies became both treasure and enigma. They were windows into survival, violence, culture, and ritual. They were reminders that even in death, human stories endure, sometimes in ways no one could anticipate. Each discovery was a challenge to historians, scientists, and the public alike. To understand the circumstances, to reconstruct lost worlds, and to respect the fragile line between curiosity and desecration. The glaciers had revealed one story and hinted at countless others. They were monuments not built by hands, but by time, weather, and circumstance. A cold archive containing the last words, the final meals, the desperate struggles of those who came before us. And somewhere in these frozen peaks, in regions untouched by modern eyes, there remained more bodies, more messages waiting to be uncovered. Each would carry with it the same haunting duality. Evidence of life and death, survival and tragedy, human ingenuity, and human vulnerability. The discovery of one ice mummy had opened the door. The question now was whether humanity was prepared to step through, to read the messages written in skin, bone, and frost. For in these frozen tombs lay more than history. They held secrets that could challenge assumptions, provoke wonder, and force a reckoning with the impermanence of life. The ice, silent yet insistent, waited. The Alps have always been a land of extremes, where beauty and danger coexist in a precarious balance. Towering peaks rise like jagged sentinels against the sky, glaciers carve deep scars into the rock, and sudden storms can turn a sunlit trail into a perilous death trap. It was in this formidable terrain, where humans are both humbled and tested, that Ötzi's body lay hidden for millennia, wrapped in ice and snow, as if the mountain itself had chosen to guard his secrets. The hikers who stumbled upon him could hardly have imagined that they were about to touch a story older than recorded history, a narrative frozen in time, waiting patiently to be told. The discovery itself was almost cinematic in its drama. It was September 1991, and the sun was already dipping behind the jagged peaks. Two German tourists were navigating a glacier near the Italian-Austrian border, their conversation light, laughter echoing across the ridges. One step, a slip, and their eyes caught something that glimmered, the tip of what seemed like a metal object poking from the ice. At first, they assumed it was a hiker's forgotten gear. But as they moved closer, the shape became unmistakable. Beneath a thin layer of frost, a human form emerged, rigid and impossibly preserved. There was no mistaking it. It was a body. Word of the find spread quickly, and experts soon arrived, scaling the glacier with care and precision. The rescue and excavation were delicate operations. The risk of destroying thousands of years of preservation with one careless movement was ever present. Layers of ice were painstakingly removed, revealing more than just a skeleton. This was a man whose body had been preserved in remarkable detail. Skin, hair, even nails survived, and his clothing, crafted from animal hides and grasses, was intact. His copper axe lay by his side, and a quiver of arrows hinted at a life spent navigating a harsh and demanding environment. It was an archaeological dream, but also a profound enigma. The initial analysis was mesmerizing. Radiocarbon dating revealed a timeline that few could have anticipated. Ötzi had died over 5,000 years ago, during the Copper Age. Yet in death, he was more real, more tangible, than many historical figures enshrined in texts and legends. Scientists could see the curve of his muscles, the wear on his joints, the cuts and bruises that marked the final moments of his life. He was not merely a relic. He was a man frozen in time, offering an unfiltered glimpse into a world that had vanished long before the first city-states rose in Mesopotamia. As the research progressed, details emerged that painted a vivid, almost cinematic portrait of his last hours. He had been shot with an arrow, the tip lodged in his shoulder, yet he had carried on. Defensive wounds on his hands and arms suggested a struggle, a confrontation with an unknown assailant. Traces of blood, preserved in the ice, told a story of pain, endurance, and desperation. He had been traveling, likely crossing the mountain trails to escape, hunt, or perhaps deliver a message lost to time. Every injury, every mark, was a chapter in a narrative frozen for millennia, waiting for interpretation. Yet, for all the scientific scrutiny, some mysteries deepened rather than resolved. The location of the body, high on a glacier, raised questions. Had he fallen while fleeing, or had he been deliberately placed there? The equipment he carried, the axe, the flint tools, the bow and arrows, spoke of a life of survival and skill, yet hinted at social and cultural sophistication. His clothing was carefully crafted, layers overlapping to protect against wind and cold, showing knowledge of materials and techniques that challenged assumptions about life in the Copper Age. Each discovery seemed to open more doors than it closed, teasing a history that was simultaneously familiar and alien. Public fascination grew as photographs of the Iceman circulated. Here was a man whose body predated pyramids and kingdoms, yet whose tools and garments revealed intelligence, artistry, and foresight. Exhibitions and documentaries showcased his remains, each detail pulling audiences deeper into the mystery. Yet beneath the awe lay unease. The more researchers uncovered, the more Ötzi seemed to transcend time. He was no longer just a body. He was a mirror, reflecting humanity's ancient struggles, fears, and resilience. And the mountain, silent and immutable, remained the ultimate guardian, holding questions that no microscope or isotope could fully answer. The discovery also sparked a global reevaluation of what the Alps had witnessed over thousands of years. These mountains were more than majestic landscapes. They were silent witnesses to human ambition, survival, and sometimes betrayal. Travelers, hunters, and warriors had crossed these peaks for millennia, leaving traces that were now revealed through frozen remains and artifacts. Ötzi's body became the centerpiece of a growing awareness that glaciers and ice fields were not merely environmental phenomena. They were archives, preserving stories, secrets, and lives that would otherwise have been lost. Every artifact found with Ötzi added layers to the mystery. The copper axe was unusually advanced for the period, suggesting long-distance trade or specialized metallurgy. His footwear and clothing were carefully constructed, optimized for mobility and warmth. Small, deliberate cuts on the hides and fabrics hinted at symbolic practices, not just practical necessity. Even the arrangement of his belongings suggested intention, order, and perhaps ritual significance. It was as though every detail had been meticulously designed to withstand the passage of millennia, to speak to a future civilization capable of recognizing the significance. And yet, the ultimate mystery remained. Why had he died here, in this remote, icy expanse? Scholars propose theories ranging from murder to ritual sacrifice, from hunting accident to tribal conflict. Each hypothesis brought with it tantalizing implications for understanding the social dynamics of early humans, their mobility, and their survival strategies. But the glacier kept its secrets, revealing only fragments, leaving enough evidence to excite and confuse in equal measure. As the sun set behind the jagged peaks, casting long shadows over the glacier, Ötzi's frozen figure seemed almost aglow, a spectral reminder of the precariousness of life and the enduring power of the past. For the world below, it was a story of science and wonder. For the mountains themselves, it was a continuation of a silent narrative stretching back thousands of years, a narrative that would only yield its final secrets to those patient enough and persistent enough to read the messages preserved in frost and stone. The Alps had revealed one man, but they hinted at countless others, waiting in ice for the right moment to tell their stories. To truly understand Ötzi, one must imagine him not as a frozen relic, but as a living, breathing human being navigating a harsh and unforgiving world. 5,000 years ago, the high Alps were no tourist playground or leisurely hiking trail. They were wilderness in the rawest sense. Jagged cliffs, sudden storms, and treacherous glaciers that demanded skill, vigilance, and endurance. Ötzi's survival depended on a profound understanding of the land, the weather, and the creatures that inhabited it. Every decision, every step, every strike of his flint tool was a matter of life and death. In this environment, a single mistake could prove fatal, and yet he thrived, moving with confidence that modern humans, burdened by convenience, can scarcely imagine. Archaeologists have painstakingly reconstructed his daily life using every fragment of evidence his frozen body preserved. The layers of hide in his clothing were carefully stitched together, optimized for warmth and mobility. Grass and moss padding in his shoes revealed an intimate knowledge of insulation against the relentless cold. His copper axe, a remarkable tool for its time, spoke not only of survival but of skill, craft, and social sophistication. He was no mere wanderer. He was a man equipped with knowledge honed through experience, a man capable of thriving in the most extreme conditions. The Iceman's diet, revealed through analysis of his stomach contents, provides a startlingly intimate window into his world. He had eaten grains, meats, and plants, meticulously chosen and prepared. Each meal was a reflection of the seasons, of migrations of animals, and of knowledge passed down through generations. He was aware of what the mountains could provide, which plants were safe to eat, which berries would sustain energy, and which roots could be used as medicine. Every bite was a calculated act of survival. In this light, Ötzi's life becomes not just a story of endurance, but of intelligence, resourcefulness, and intimate connection with his environment. But survival was not just about food and clothing. It was also about awareness and vigilance. Evidence of his injuries, small cuts, bruises, and healed wounds, reveals a life constantly in motion, a life marked by encounters with danger. These were not random accidents. They were the consequences of hunting, traveling treacherous passes, or defending himself from human or animal threats. Each scar, each mark preserved in his flesh, tells a story of confrontation, of struggle, and of resilience. He was a man intimately acquainted with pain, yet never wholly defined by it. Ötzi's tools reveal another layer of his existence: ingenuity and cultural sophistication. The copper axe alone suggests that his society had achieved significant technological advancement, mastering metallurgy in ways that challenge previous assumptions about Copper Age communities. Flint blades, arrows, and scrapers were carefully crafted for specific purposes, reflecting not only survival needs but also an understanding of efficiency and adaptation. These tools were extensions of his body, as vital as hands or eyes, and they carried symbolic weight as well. In a world where survival hinged on skill and strategy, mastery of one's tools could determine life or death. Beyond survival, The marks on his body offer a glimpse into rituals, beliefs, and practices that hint at the spiritual or social dimensions of his life. Dark lines etched into his skin, once assumed to be simple decoration, are now interpreted as therapeutic tattoos, perhaps intended to alleviate pain or mark stages of life. They are silent testaments to practices and knowledge passed down in a culture that left no written record. Each line is both functional and symbolic, an ancient message encoded in flesh, waiting for modern interpretation. The mountain trails he traversed were more than geographic challenges. They were lifelines, trade routes, and corridors of cultural exchange. Pollen and microdebris in his stomach and clothing indicate that he traveled between valleys, perhaps carrying goods, messages, or information. He was connected to a broader human network, one that stretched across rugged terrain and spanned generations. Every footfall on those icy paths was a thread in a web of human interaction, weaving together the stories of countless people long forgotten. And yet, despite his skills and knowledge, Ötzi's life was fraught with peril. The arrow wound that would ultimately end him was evidence of conflict, betrayal, or perhaps a chance encounter gone wrong. It reminds us that no matter how intelligent or prepared, humans have always been vulnerable to forces beyond their control, be it nature, circumstance, or the actions of others. The mountain, while a source of sustenance and knowledge, was also an indifferent arbiter of life and death, offering no mercy to those who faltered. One of the most striking aspects of his life is how ordinary it was, despite the extraordinary preservation of his remains. He was not a king or a deity. He was a man like any other, tending to daily needs, hunting for food, making decisions that mattered profoundly for survival. To truly understand Ötzi, one must imagine him not as a frozen relic, but as a living, breathing human being navigating a harsh and unforgiving world. 5,000 years ago, the high Alps were no tourist playground or leisurely hiking trail. They were wilderness in the rawest sense. Jagged cliffs, sudden storms, and treacherous glaciers that demanded skill, vigilance, and endurance. Ötzi's survival depended on a profound understanding of the land, the weather, and the creatures that inhabited it. Every decision, every step, every strike of his flint tool was a matter of life and death. In this environment, a single mistake could prove fatal, and yet he thrived, moving with confidence that modern humans, burdened by convenience, can scarcely imagine. Archaeologists have painstakingly reconstructed his daily life using every fragment of evidence his frozen body preserved. The layers of hide in his clothing were carefully stitched together, optimized for warmth and mobility. Grass and moss padding in his shoes revealed an intimate knowledge of insulation against the relentless cold. His copper axe, a remarkable tool for its time, spoke not only of survival but of skill, craft, and social sophistication. He was no mere wanderer. He was a man equipped with knowledge honed through experience, a man capable of thriving in the most extreme conditions. The Iceman's diet, revealed through analysis of his stomach contents, provides a startlingly intimate window into his world. He had eaten grains, meats, and plants, meticulously chosen and prepared. Each meal was a reflection of the seasons, of migrations of animals, and of knowledge passed down through generations. He was aware of what the mountains could provide, which plants were safe to eat, which berries would sustain energy, and which roots could be used as medicine. Every bite was a calculated act of survival. In this light, Ötzi's life becomes not just a story of endurance, but of intelligence, resourcefulness, and intimate connection with his environment. But survival was not just about food and clothing. It was also about awareness and vigilance. Evidence of his injuries, small cuts, bruises, and healed wounds, reveals a life constantly in motion, a life marked by encounters with danger. These were not random accidents. They were the consequences of hunting, traveling treacherous passes, or defending himself from human or animal threats. Each scar, each mark preserved in his flesh, tells a story of confrontation, of struggle, and of resilience. He was a man intimately acquainted with pain, yet never wholly defined by it. Ötzi's tools reveal another layer of his existence: ingenuity and cultural sophistication. The copper axe alone suggests that his society had achieved significant technological advancement, mastering metallurgy in ways that challenge previous assumptions about Copper Age communities. Flint blades, arrows, and scrapers were carefully crafted for specific purposes, reflecting not only survival needs but also an understanding of efficiency and adaptation. These tools were extensions of his body, as vital as hands or eyes, and they carried symbolic weight as well. In a world where survival hinged on skill and strategy, mastery of one's tools could determine life or death. Beyond survival, the marks on his body offer a glimpse into rituals, beliefs, and practices that hint at the spiritual or social dimensions of his life. Dark lines etched into his skin, once assumed to be simple decoration, are now interpreted as therapeutic tattoos, perhaps intended to alleviate pain or mark stages of life. They are silent testaments to practices and knowledge passed down in a culture that left no written record. Each line is both functional and symbolic, an ancient message encoded in flesh, waiting for modern interpretation. The mountain trails he traversed were more than geographic challenges. They were lifelines, trade routes, and corridors of cultural exchange. Pollen and microdebris in his stomach and clothing indicate that he traveled between valleys, perhaps carrying goods, messages, or information. He was connected to a broader human network, one that stretched across rugged terrain and spanned generations. Every footfall on those icy paths was a thread in a web of human interaction, weaving together the stories of countless people long forgotten. And yet, despite his skills and knowledge, Ötzi's life was fraught with peril. The arrow wound that would ultimately end him was evidence of conflict, betrayal, or perhaps a chance encounter gone wrong. It reminds us that no matter how intelligent or prepared, humans have always been vulnerable to forces beyond their control, be it nature, circumstance, or the actions of others. The mountain, while a source of sustenance and knowledge, was also an indifferent arbiter of life and death, offering no mercy to those who faltered. One of the most striking aspects of his life is how ordinary it was, despite the extraordinary preservation of his remains. He was not a king or a deity. He was a man like any other, tending to daily needs, hunting for food, making decisions that mattered profoundly for survival. This ordinary existence, preserved in such extraordinary detail, bridges the gap between us and a world long vanished. It allows modern humans to connect emotionally with someone who lived thousands of years ago, to see in him our own struggles, desires, and mortality reflected across time. The more we study him, the more Ötzi becomes a mirror of the human condition. He reveals the universality of life, the struggle to survive, the need for tools and community, the vulnerability to injury and betrayal, the desire for meaning. His frozen body is not just a scientific artifact. It is a storybook of humanity, every detail inscribed with the ink of experience, pain, and resilience. It challenges our notions of civilization and primitive life, showing that intelligence, strategy, and culture are not inventions of written history. They are the enduring legacy of all human beings, frozen or living across time. And yet, for all we can reconstruct, mysteries remain. We can see the arrow, the bruises, the tattoos, and the tools, but we cannot fully know his thoughts, his fears, or the motivations of those around him. Each revelation is matched by a new question. Why was he traveling alone? Who fired the arrow? Was his death an accident, a personal vendetta, or part of a larger conflict? The mountain holds these answers as jealously as it held his body, reminding us that history is both visible and invisible, tangible and elusive. To imagine Ötzi's life is to step into a frozen world where survival demanded ingenuity, courage, and knowledge of the natural world. It is to recognize the fragility of human life and the endurance of human spirit. He was a man shaped by his environment, yet his actions shaped the environment in return, through hunting, crafting, traveling, and interacting with others. His story, preserved in ice, is a testament to the extraordinary within the ordinary, a reminder that even the most basic human existence carries with it complexity, struggle, and purpose. As the Alps stretch silently into the horizon, Ötzi's preserved form remains a bridge between our world and his. In every stitch of his clothing, every mark on his skin, every tool he carried, there is a lesson about humanity, its resilience, intelligence, and vulnerability. His life, though long buried and frozen, speaks across millennia, inviting us to listen, to learn, and to marvel at the intricate tapestry of human existence preserved in the cold heart of the mountains. Ötzi's last journey was a trek written in blood, frost, and silence. A final passage that would carry him into history, frozen yet alive in memory. He moved through the high alpine valleys with purpose, though what drove him remains a question no modern mind can fully answer. Perhaps he was hunting, seeking sustenance for himself or his community. Perhaps he was fleeing from a threat, human or otherwise. Every footstep on the treacherous ice and rock was a battle against gravity, against frostbite, against the unseen dangers that had claimed many before him. The mountain demanded respect, and Ötzi, seasoned by experience, gave it, moving cautiously but with a determination born of necessity. The evidence of his journey is etched into his body and his belongings. Cuts on his hands and arms suggest he navigated sharp rock and ice, or perhaps fought to defend himself. Dirt and plant matter trapped in the folds of his clothing indicate movement across varied terrain: meadows, rocky ridges, and glacial paths. The pollen found in his stomach hints at a journey across valleys separated by miles of inhospitable terrain. He carried tools for every eventuality: flint for cutting, a bow and arrows for hunting, and a copper axe of exceptional craftsmanship. Each object was chosen with care, not just for survival, but for the versatility needed in a landscape that could turn deadly in an instant. Yet there was more than survival at play. Small, subtle details reveal a man aware of danger and driven by purpose. His shoes, reinforced with layers of grass and hide, allowed him to traverse ice without slipping. His clothing was tailored for warmth but also for mobility, enabling him to climb, run, or hide if necessary. Every aspect of his preparation suggests foresight, planning, and knowledge of the land passed down through generations. He was a man of his time, yet his intelligence and adaptability elevate him far above the primitive stereotype often applied to Copper Age humans. But the mountains are indifferent. Despite all his skill, Ötzi could not escape the fatal event that awaited him. The arrow, lodged deep in his shoulder, tells a story of sudden violence. A confrontation, perhaps, born of jealousy, vengeance, or territorial dispute. Defensive wounds on his hands indicate that he fought back, though not effectively enough to save himself. The final moments of his life were a blur of pain, exertion, and desperation, carried out against a backdrop of towering cliffs, icy winds, and a sunless sky. In death, the mountain preserved him, as though to honor his struggle or perhaps to offer humanity a lesson that survival is both fragile and fleeting. The placement of his body is another mystery. He was found on a high glacier, a location that would have been difficult to reach even in life. Had he climbed deliberately to escape his pursuers? Or had the journey been accidental, perhaps a fall or misstep that left him exposed and vulnerable? Every theory carries implications about his society and the people he interacted with. Was he alone in his journey, or had he been separated from companions? Was this an attack by strangers, or by someone known to him, motivated by conflict, fear, or betrayal? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete, leaving us to reconstruct a story from fragments that have survived thousands of years. Even in these final moments, Ötzi's tools and possessions reflect his resilience. The copper axe, carried but unused in his death, suggests he was prepared to defend himself or to work with his hands if necessary. The flint knife at his side and the quiver of arrows indicate he had plans to hunt, to gather food, to continue life. Every item is a testament to human ingenuity, a reminder that even when death is imminent, preparation and skill are enduring expressions of survival instinct. The juxtaposition of his careful planning with the sudden violence that ended him is both poignant and haunting. Modern science has attempted to retrace his steps, to reconstruct the geography of his final journey. Using pollen analysis, isotopic studies, and environmental reconstruction, researchers have mapped potential routes, hunting grounds, and resting points. These studies suggest he crossed valleys and ridges, navigating terrain that would challenge even the most experienced mountaineers today. Each step was deliberate, yet each carried inherent risk. Every landscape feature, from hidden crevasses to sheer cliffs, played a role in shaping the final narrative of his life. There is also evidence of human interaction beyond the fatal encounter. Bruises, cuts, and the trajectory of the arrow suggest someone had intended to stop him, perhaps to control resources, assert dominance, or settle a personal score. Theories abound. He may have been part of a conflict between neighboring tribes, a messenger carrying information, or a man caught in a personal vendetta. The absence of witnesses leaves the scenario shrouded in uncertainty, yet it is precisely this uncertainty that amplifies the drama of his last journey. Ötzi's death was not swift or simple. It was layered, brutal, and reflective of a life lived on the edge. The mountain preserved the narrative of his struggle, freezing not just his body, but the sequence of events, the choices made, and the consequences that followed. In a sense, the glacier became both grave and chronicle, capturing the tension, fear, and resilience that defined his final hours. Unlike typical archaeological finds, which offer only remnants and conjecture, Ötzi presents a vivid, almost cinematic window into the human experience, frozen in time yet profoundly relatable. As we follow the traces left by his journey, it becomes clear that Ötzi's life and death were entwined with the environment in ways modern humans rarely experience. His survival required constant adaptation, knowledge of terrain, and skill in reading subtle signs from plants, animals, and weather. His final hours underscore the unforgiving nature of the Alps and the inherent fragility of human existence. And yet, his preservation speaks to something larger. A convergence of human ingenuity, environmental forces, and sheer chance that allowed his story to endure far beyond the lifespan of anyone who knew him. There is a haunting poetry in this. A man who navigated mountains, hunted animals, and carried out daily routines over 5,000 years ago now reaches out across millennia, challenging us to understand him. Every scratch on his skin, every bruise, every tool is part of a narrative that transcends time, reminding us of the universality of human struggle and resilience. In his final journey, he becomes both protagonist and witness, a man whose ordinary life and extraordinary death offers insight into the past, into the human condition, and into the silent mountains that bore witness to his end. And so, as the glacier cradled his body, Ötzi's last journey ended not with closure, but with a beginning. The beginning of a story that would fascinate generations, inspire scientific discovery, and evoke wonder at the endurance of human life and memory. It was a journey of survival, skill, and inevitable mortality, preserved by ice, awaiting those who would listen and interpret the frozen messages he carried. The mountains had claimed him, yet through preservation, they had also gifted him to the world. A man frozen, but not forgotten. Every mark on Ötzi's body tells a story, each line etched into skin more than 5,000 years ago. A narrative frozen, yet speaking volumes. The tattoos, dark and precise, were not decorative. They were purposeful, placed over areas corresponding to joints and muscles, spots that had been chronically painful. Modern researchers now believe they were a form of therapeutic treatment, an ancient precursor to acupuncture or physiotherapy, evidence of a sophisticated understanding of the human body. In this sense, Ötzi's skin was not merely a canvas, but a map of experience, pain, and knowledge. Every line is a message encoded by necessity, a window into a civilization that left no written records but spoke vividly through the human form. His clothing, carefully constructed from multiple layers of animal hides and grasses, demonstrates an extraordinary knowledge of insulation, mobility, and environmental adaptation. The hide was expertly tanned, stitched, and fitted to his body. Grass padding inside his shoes not only insulated against freezing surfaces but also cushioned his steps, allowing him to traverse glaciers with remarkable efficiency. The arrangement of his garments indicates forethought, a clear awareness of the extremes of alpine conditions. Each piece of clothing is a testament to human ingenuity, reflecting skills honed over generations, passed down in the absence of written language, in a culture where survival depended on knowledge, craft, and observation. Yet it is the combination of tattoos and clothing that reveals the intimacy of Ötzi's life. They are marks of experience, strategy, and adaptation, demonstrating not only his physical resilience but also the ways his community shared knowledge and skill. These are not random individuals wandering a frozen landscape. They are members of a complex society capable of creating tools, clothing, and systems of care that transcend basic survival. The human touch is evident in every stitch, every line, every deliberate choice, emphasizing a sophistication often underestimated in Copper Age Europe. The tools found with him are equally revealing. The copper axe is exceptional. Not merely a weapon but a multifunctional instrument, its metal carefully cast and polished. Such a tool required not only the knowledge to smelt and shape copper but also access to resources and perhaps a network of trade or communal production. In a time when most tools were stone, this axe suggests a combination of status, skill, and cultural significance. It is a tangible connection to the ingenuity of early humans, a reminder that even in a world of ice and rock, intellectual advancement and craftsmanship flourished. The flint tools, scrapers, and arrowheads that accompanied him were no less remarkable. Each was shaped with precision, designed for specific tasks: cutting, scraping, hunting. The selection and maintenance of these tools illustrate a life in which planning, foresight, and skill determined survival. They were extensions of his body, as essential as hands or eyes, allowing him to interact with the environment in ways his naked body could not. To hold them, to study them, is to glimpse the intersection of necessity and intellect, the quiet genius of a human adapting to a harsh world. But these tools also carry an emotional resonance. They were not mere objects. They were companions, instruments of survival, and perhaps even symbols of identity. The copper axe, in particular, may have conveyed status or role within his society. Some researchers suggest that such a finely crafted weapon indicated leadership, a protector, or a figure of significance in communal life. Every artifact, preserved in ice alongside his body, offers insight not only into Ötzi's personal survival strategies, but into the social structures that framed his world. Even small, seemingly mundane items tell stories of human ingenuity and daily life. The quiver of arrows, partially decayed but still recognizable, speaks of hunting, skill, and patience. The materials chosen for the arrows suggest knowledge of local fauna, flight trajectories, and balance, as well as the ability to maintain and repair tools under challenging conditions. His belt, pouches, and carrying apparatus were functional yet sophisticated, showing that every item he carried was intentional, every detail meaningful, and every choice a reflection of experience. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of these preserved possessions is how intimately they connect us to Ötzi. Modern humans often perceive ancient peoples as distant, primitive, and alien. Yet the combination of tattoos, clothing, and tools reveals universality. We see in him our own need to protect, to adapt, to leave traces of ourselves for those who might come after. His ingenuity mirrors our own, his foresight recognizable, his struggles painfully familiar. Through these items, Ötzi transcends time, reminding us that the human experience, the drive to survive, to endure, to leave a mark, is consistent across millennia. The more researchers studied these objects, the more they realized that each artifact was carefully selected and preserved. The combination of tools, clothing, and tattoos was not accidental. It was deliberate. Each choice reflects knowledge passed down over generations, strategies refined to withstand environmental extremes. Every aspect of Ötzi's preparation, from the layering of his garments to the placement of his tattoos, from the sharpening of his flint tools to the care of his copper axe, was an act of intentionality, a message to the future preserved in ice. And yet, even with all this knowledge, there remain mysteries. Why did he carry certain items and not others? Were some tools symbolic rather than purely functional? Did his tattoos carry meaning beyond pain management, perhaps reflecting spiritual or communal beliefs? The ice preserves the evidence, but interpretation requires imagination, caution, and respect. Every line, stitch, and tool challenges us to reconstruct a life without distorting it, to honor the intelligence, creativity, and resilience that defined him. The preservation of Ötzi and his possessions also illuminates broader patterns in human history. Across cultures and continents, we see parallels. Tools as extensions of the body, clothing designed for climate and mobility, markings and symbols encoding knowledge. In this sense, Ötzi is not just an isolated individual. He is representative of a human instinct that stretches far beyond his own life. The impulse to survive, adapt, communicate, and leave evidence of our existence. He is at once unique and universal, a figure frozen in time who continues to teach, inspire, and provoke wonder. In the end, the story told by his tattoos, clothing, and tools is as much about humanity as it is about him. It speaks of adaptation, innovation, foresight, and the interconnection of human communities with their environment. It reminds us that survival is not merely a biological imperative, but a cultural one, shaped by knowledge, skill, and shared experience. Ötzi's possessions, preserved with such meticulous care by nature, are not relics alone. They are messages, frozen in ice, calling to us across millennia to understand, to learn, and to marvel at the ingenuity and resilience of our ancestors. Ötzi's final hours are a narrative written not in words, but in wounds, bruises, and the trajectory of an arrow, each detail meticulously preserved by ice. Forensic scientists approached his body with the precision of detectives, piecing together a story of violence that unfolded thousands of years ago. The arrow lodged in his left shoulder was the first and most obvious clue. Its placement suggested not an accidental injury, but an intentional strike, fired with intent to harm or kill. The angle and depth of the wound indicated a close encounter, one in which the assailant had targeted a vulnerable spot. In life, it would have been excruciating, and in death, it became the first evidence of a drama frozen in time. But the arrow alone did not tell the whole story. Defensive wounds on Ötzi's hands, arms, and even legs suggested he had fought back, attempting to protect himself from an attack. Cuts and bruises on the back of his hands indicated he had blocked blows, perhaps with a tool or his forearms, while scratches on his forearms suggested struggle and desperation. Each mark was a testament to the human instinct to survive, the same instinct that allowed him to endure the harsh alpine environment for thousands of years. The interplay of these injuries created a tableau of conflict, a frozen moment of chaos that the ice had preserved for the modern world to decipher. Even subtle details in his wounds provided insight into the nature of the confrontation. Bruising patterns indicated that he had likely been grappling with his attacker, suggesting a physical struggle rather than a sudden, isolated act of aggression. The arrow's trajectory suggested that the assailant was likely at a higher position, firing downward, which may imply pursuit or ambush. It is possible Ötzi had been fleeing across the mountains when he was struck, a man skilled in the terrain yet unable to outrun the forces that sought to end his life. The forensic evidence creates a haunting narrative. A man navigating familiar paths, suddenly confronted by betrayal, fear, and violence. Equally telling is the absence of defensive wounds on his legs or torso beyond certain points, suggesting that the struggle may have been brief or that the arrow struck decisively, incapacitating him rapidly. Researchers also noted bruising around his ribs and shoulders, hinting at the use of force, perhaps a shove, a fall, or blunt impact during the confrontation. Each injury, each mark, is a fragment of a story we can never fully reconstruct. Yet together they form a chilling portrait of the Iceman's last encounter. The mountain, indifferent and timeless, bore silent witness to his struggle, preserving it in ice as both grave and record. The circumstances of the attack remain open to interpretation. Some scholars suggest that the violence was the result of a personal vendetta, perhaps arising from disputes over resources, territory, or status. Others propose a scenario of tribal conflict, where Ötzi, traveling alone, became a casualty of broader tensions in Copper Age Europe. The absence of his attacker, coupled with the precision and lethality of the arrow, adds layers of mystery. Was he ambushed by someone he knew, or by a stranger? Was it a crime of opportunity or a planned act of vengeance? The forensic evidence can suggest, but it cannot confirm, leaving us suspended between historical reconstruction and imaginative conjecture. The location of his body further complicates the mystery. High on a glacier, Ötzi's final resting place was difficult to access, even in life. If he had been fleeing, the terrain may have contributed to his vulnerability. The mountains, both shelter and predator, shaped his final hours. In this context, the glacier becomes more than preservation. It becomes a stage, a setting for a violent drama in which environmental forces and human intent intersected. The ice acts as a silent narrator, holding details intact, allowing us to reconstruct moments with remarkable clarity, yet leaving enough ambiguity to preserve the sense of wonder and tragedy. The forensic examination also revealed the meticulousness of his attacker. The arrow had not merely grazed him. It had struck a critical point, one that would hinder movement and weaken defense. This detail suggests knowledge, intent, and possibly experience in hunting or combat. It raises unsettling questions about the nature of interpersonal violence in prehistory. Humans, even in small, isolated communities, were capable of betrayal, aggression, and lethal action. Ötzi's death, preserved in ice, is an enduring testament to these universal and timeless aspects of human behavior. Interestingly, his own preparedness contrasts sharply with the suddenness of his death. Ötzi carried tools that could have been used for defense: the copper axe, the flint knife, even arrows that might have been fired in response. His clothing and gear reflect careful planning, a lifetime of adapting to environmental challenges. Yet, despite his intelligence and resourcefulness, he could not overcome the human threat. There is a stark lesson in this juxtaposition. Skill, knowledge, and foresight can mitigate natural dangers, but the actions of others remain unpredictable, capable of overturning even the most carefully planned existence. The Iceman's wounds also provide a window into the psychology of prehistory. He was aware of danger. His defensive injuries suggest quick thinking and a will to survive. The precision of the arrow, conversely, suggests his attacker understood the anatomy and vulnerabilities of a human body, revealing the tactical nature of violence even in the Copper Age. Each scar, each bruise, is a piece of a narrative puzzle that allows us to imagine not just the physical confrontation, but the fear, urgency, and desperation experienced by both hunter and hunted. The ice preserves more than tissue. It preserves emotion, the invisible imprint of human experience across time. Forensic analysis further reveals subtleties that transform him from artifact into character. Blood residues, tissue preservation, and even the positioning of his body suggest a struggle that was both physical and temporal. He did not die instantly but fought for every second, moving, grappling, surviving as long as he could. The narrative that emerges is cinematic. A lone man, in the harsh Alps, fighting against injury, terrain, and human intent. The mountain and the glacier are silent observers, the stage set in ice, the drama frozen for millennia, waiting for the eyes of modern humans to interpret its story. Finally, Ötzi's death challenges modern perceptions of prehistory. It forces us to confront the realities of life in a world without hospitals, weapons without regulation, and landscapes that could kill as easily as they nurtured. It reminds us that humanity, despite progress, remains entwined with conflict, survival, and mortality. The Iceman's final moments are not just archaeological evidence. They are a narrative of human resilience and vulnerability, a frozen testament to the universal struggles that define our species. And so, the frozen crime scene of the Alps is both history and morality play. Through wounds and bruises, through defensive scars and the fatal arrow, Ötzi speaks to us across 5 millennia. He tells a story of life and death, of skill and vulnerability, of preparation and unpredictability. The glacier preserves this narrative in its purest form, a cinematic tableau of human existence at its most raw. In death, he continues to teach, to captivate, and to remind us that the mountains hold secrets not only of the earth, but of humanity itself. The arrow and bruises told the story of Ötzi's final moments, but the layers beneath the surface told an even deeper story, one of movement, diet, and human networks stretching across the Alps. Modern forensic techniques opened a window into his life with unprecedented clarity. Pollen trapped in his digestive system, isotopic analysis of his teeth and bones, and traces of plants and animals on his clothing allowed researchers to map his movements, revealing a man who was no mere wanderer. He traveled purposefully, navigating valleys, passes, and highlands with knowledge honed over years, guided by instinct and experience. Every step he took left evidence, each layer of frost preserving a breadcrumb trail of his life. Analysis of Ötzi's stomach and intestines revealed his last meals, a combination of grains, dried meats, and local vegetation. The composition of his diet was surprising. It reflected not just subsistence but planning and adaptation. The choice of foods shows a man aware of caloric needs, energy reserves, and seasonal availability. Traces of ibex, red deer, and even cereal grains suggest a diet that was both varied and calculated, balancing the needs for protein, carbohydrates, and nutrition against what the harsh alpine environment could provide. Even 5,000 years later, these remnants speak to human intelligence, resourcefulness, and foresight. The pollen in his digestive system revealed movements across multiple ecological zones. Some grains came from lower valleys, while others originated from high-altitude alpine flora. This indicates not random wandering, but a deliberate passage through different environments, likely for hunting, trade, or social purposes. He had moved across considerable distances, traversing landscapes that were physically demanding and potentially dangerous. His journey reflects a deep knowledge of the land, including where to find food, where to hide from threats, and which paths allowed safe passage. This is not the life of an isolated individual. It is the life of a connected, strategic human being, navigating a complex world. The isotopic analysis of Ötzi's teeth and bones added yet another layer of insight. Oxygen isotopes indicated seasonal movements, while strontium analysis suggested he had spent time in valleys far from where he was ultimately found. Together, these studies reveal a pattern of movement and connection that implies social networks spanning the Alps. He was not a lone hunter. He was part of a society, participating in exchanges of food, goods, or information. Even in a world without roads or written language, humans maintained mobility and relationships that shaped their survival. His frozen body becomes more than a relic. It becomes a node in a living web of human interaction. Further clues came from his tools and clothing, which themselves carry signatures of origin. The copper used in his axe, traced through isotopic analysis, suggests trade networks reaching distant regions. The hides used in his garments came from specific animal species, carefully processed and crafted. Flint tools were shaped in patterns characteristic of particular communities, indicating cultural transmission of knowledge. Each artifact serves as a geographical and social marker, connecting Ötzi to a human landscape far larger than his frozen resting place. He was part of a story of cooperation, innovation, and movement that defined Copper Age Europe. The combination of diet, travel, and tools reveals a remarkable level of adaptation. Ötzi's life was a delicate balance of nutrition, mobility, and survival strategy. Each decision, when and where to hunt, which paths to take, which plants to gather, was informed by experience and knowledge. This insight challenges any simplistic notion of prehistoric life as brutish or limited. Instead, it portrays humans as intelligent, observant, and adaptive, capable of sophisticated planning and problem-solving. Even today, these insights inspire admiration for the resilience and ingenuity of early humans. But Ötzi's movements also hint at broader human drama. Traveling alone or with companions, he had likely encountered threats both natural and human. The arrow in his shoulder suggests a violent confrontation, possibly tied to territorial disputes or social tensions. The high-altitude passes he crossed were dangerous and strategic, implying that his journey may have been motivated by more than subsistence. It could have been for communication, alliance, or escape. Every step through the snow, every mile across rock and ice, becomes a piece of a larger narrative, revealing not just individual endurance, but the interplay of human societies, geography, and survival strategies. The integration of these scientific findings transforms Ötzi from an archaeological curiosity into a living, dynamic figure. He was not static. He moved, planned, and interacted. His diet reveals intention, his travels reveal awareness, and his tools reveal skill. In combination, they reconstruct a human life with nuance and depth, reminding us that history is not just about kings and empires. It is about ordinary humans navigating extraordinary challenges. In a sense, the glacier becomes a stage, preserving not only his body, but the complexity of his life, allowing us to witness the drama of survival as vividly as if it had happened yesterday. Interestingly, the evidence also points to a subtle hierarchy in his society. The quality of his copper axe, the careful construction of his garments, and the sophistication of his tools suggest he held some level of status. He was likely respected for his knowledge, skill, or experience, roles that were essential for group survival in harsh environments. Even without written records, these physical traces reveal social structures, values, and hierarchies within his community. Ötzi's frozen body thus becomes a record not only of individual life, but of collective human experience, offering insight into the complex interplay of survival, cooperation, and social order. In addition to these practical aspects, the microanalysis of his remains uncovered subtle details about human adaptation and physiology. Traces of stress on his bones, minor arthritis, and healed wounds suggest a life of labor and endurance, balanced by recovery and resilience. His body reflects the human capacity to adapt to environmental and physical pressures over a lifetime, reinforcing the notion that prehistoric humans were remarkably capable, resilient, and intelligent. Each preserved detail contributes to a fuller understanding of what it meant to live, survive, and thrive in a world shaped by extreme conditions. Perhaps most compelling is the way these discoveries humanize him. In studying his diet, travels, and tools, we see not an abstract figure, but a man with intentions, skills, and strategies. He planned meals, navigated treacherous terrain, and made decisions that would affect his survival. He was acutely aware of the land, the seasons, and the risks posed by both nature and other humans. In this, Ötzi becomes profoundly relatable, a figure who bridges millennia to remind us that, at its core, the human experience is enduringly similar. Survival, adaptation, social connection, and the pursuit of meaning in an unpredictable world. Ultimately, the investigation of Ötzi's origin, diet, and travels does more than reconstruct a life. It transforms our understanding of early humans. The meticulous scientific work illuminates not just a frozen man, but a society, a landscape, and a network of relationships. The Alps, with their glaciers and peaks, become a canvas upon which a narrative of intelligence, ingenuity, and resilience is painted. Each pollen grain, bone fragment, and tool becomes a sentence in a story that stretches across time, inviting us to step into the life of a man who lived, struggled, and died 5,000 years ago, and yet, through preservation and discovery, continues to speak to us today. Despite the meticulous reconstruction of Ötzi's diet, travels, and tools, the most compelling and haunting questions revolve around the violence that ended his life. The arrow lodged in his shoulder is just the beginning. Every bruise, cut, and defensive wound on his body suggests a confrontation that was sudden, brutal, and profoundly human. Forensic scientists approached the Iceman as detectives, piecing together the evidence with painstaking care, reconstructing a narrative that had been frozen and hidden for over 5 millennia. Every detail, from the angle of the arrow to the pattern of bruising, adds to a picture of both desperation and calculated intent. The arrow itself was extraordinary in its craftsmanship. Made from flint, it was a weapon designed for lethality, its tip not only sharp but expertly shaped. Analysis revealed that it was fired from a short distance, aimed with precision to incapacitate. It was not a random act of violence. It was a deliberate strike, suggesting premeditation and knowledge of anatomy. Whoever fired the arrow knew the target well enough to exploit weakness, aiming for a fatal point that would compromise movement and defense. This singular act transforms the Alps from a passive backdrop into an active stage, where human intention and natural forces intersected with deadly consequence. Yet Ötzi did not die instantly. Defensive wounds across his hands, arms, and shoulders indicate that he struggled, attempting to protect himself from his assailant. Bruises on the forearms suggest he raised his arms to block blows, scratches on his hands indicate grappling, and minor cuts on his torso hint at close-quarters conflict. This was not a quick execution. It was a struggle, a clash between survival instinct and lethal intent. Through his preserved wounds, we glimpse his final moments. The fear, the exertion, the determination to live against overwhelming odds. The forensic narrative becomes more intricate when we consider the placement and angle of the arrow. Striking from above, it implies that the assailant may have had higher ground, using the terrain to their advantage. This detail introduces a strategic element to the encounter, suggesting planning and awareness rather than impulsive violence. Ötzi, despite his knowledge of the mountains, may have been caught off guard, forced into a position where his survival skills were insufficient. The environment itself becomes a silent accomplice in the story of his death, amplifying the drama and unpredictability of human conflict. The location of Ötzi's body adds further mystery. Found on a glacier at high altitude, it is a place difficult to reach even today, suggesting several possible scenarios. Perhaps he was fleeing, seeking refuge or higher ground to evade his attacker. Perhaps he was pursued deliberately to this remote location, cornered by someone intent on ending his life. The glacier, in its frozen impartiality, preserves this final act as a tableau of both human intent and environmental influence, leaving modern observers to decode the sequence of events from the evidence alone. Researchers also examined the possibility of multiple assailants. The pattern of injuries, including defensive wounds and the fatal arrow, indicates a confrontation that could have involved more than one individual. Some suggest that he was targeted not merely as an individual, but as part of a social or territorial conflict, where group dynamics played a role in his demise. The theory that Ötzi's death was the result of interpersonal or tribal violence transforms the narrative from a simple murder into a window into the social tensions of Copper Age Europe. Every bruise, cut, and mark becomes a clue to the relationships, rivalries, and hierarchies that shaped human interaction thousands of years ago. The forensic reconstruction also highlights Ötzi's resilience. Despite being struck by the arrow, he moved, grappled, and likely attempted to escape. His last footsteps through the ice and rock demonstrate extraordinary physical effort under extreme duress. This was a man trained by the mountains, capable of endurance, yet ultimately overcome by a combination of human intention and environmental challenge. The drama of his final hours is cinematic, a struggle between life and death, skill and violence, human will and fate. Even modern forensic debates underscore the mystery. Some researchers argue the arrow wound was the ultimate cause of death. Others suggest that exposure, combined with physical trauma and blood loss, contributed equally. Some posit that he may have fallen or been struck by the environment during the struggle, adding another layer of complexity. Each theory carries profound implications, not just for understanding his death, but for reconstructing the dynamics of life, conflict, and survival in the Copper Age. Every detail requires careful interpretation, balancing evidence and imagination to honor the humanity of the Iceman. This forensic analysis also reveals unsettling truths about human nature. Ötzi's death reminds us that violence, jealousy, competition, and betrayal are timeless aspects of human interaction. Even in small, early societies, the impulses that lead to conflict were present. The arrow, a tool of survival turned instrument of human intent, embodies the duality of human innovation. The same ingenuity that allows us to hunt and survive can also be used to harm and destroy. In this sense, Ötzi's frozen death is more than a story of an individual. It is a reflection of universal human experience. Moreover, the unresolved nature of the murder adds to the intrigue. We may never know who struck the arrow, why it was fired, or the identity of the possible accomplices. The social context, relationships, rivalries, or territorial disputes remain speculative yet tantalizing. Each unanswered question deepens the mystery, transforming the Alpine glacier into a stage for an unsolved crime that spans millennia. Modern investigators, armed with forensic science, can illuminate possibilities, but the ultimate truth remains locked in ice, preserved as it was on the day of the encounter. Yet even in death, Ötzi communicates. The wounds, the placement of his body, and the frozen artifacts around him speak volumes about his final moments, about the dangers of life in the Alps, and about the complex interplay of human skill, environmental knowledge, and social dynamics. The forensic evidence transforms him from relic to protagonist, allowing us to witness the tension, fear, and struggle that define the final hours of a man who lived 5,000 years ago. It is a story that transcends time, reminding us of the fragility and resilience inherent in human existence. Ultimately, the frozen crime scene of Ötzi is both historical evidence and narrative masterpiece. Every arrow, bruise, and cut is a word in a story written by humans, nature, and fate. The glacier preserves not just his body, but the drama, strategy, and emotion of his final confrontation. It is a tableau of life and death, survival and vulnerability, skill and violence, an unparalleled lens through which we glimpse the raw realities of prehistory. The Alps hold many secrets, but in Ötzi, one voice resonates clearly: a human story of endurance, tragedy, and the timeless complexity of life. After the fatal encounter, Ötzi's body was left in the high Alps, exposed to elements that would both conceal and preserve him. Unlike a typical burial, there was no grave, no ceremony, only the indifferent glacier that claimed him. Yet it was this very indifference that would turn a tragedy into one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of our time. The cold, the ice, and the unique conditions of the high-altitude Alps combined to create a natural time capsule, capturing not just his body, but the story of a life lived thousands of years ago. Here, human vulnerability met nature's impartial hand, preserving a man who would speak to the future long after his death. The glacier's role in preservation is extraordinary. In most cases, organic material, skin, hair, clothing, even wooden tools, decays within decades or centuries. Yet in Ötzi's case, the frigid, oxygen-deprived ice halted decomposition, locking every detail in place. Skin, hair, fingernails, and even the contents of his stomach were preserved in astonishing detail. Every wound, scar, and tattoo became a permanent record, while clothing and tools remained intact. The ice did not simply freeze him. It suspended him in a moment, creating a three-dimensional narrative that would allow modern scientists to reconstruct a life, a journey, and a violent death with unparalleled clarity. Even the smallest features of his environment contributed to preservation. Layers of snow compacted into ice, limiting microbial activity that would otherwise accelerate decay. Seasonal freeze-thaw cycles created a natural refrigeration, while the altitude reduced oxygen levels, slowing chemical processes. Tiny particles trapped in the ice, from pollen to plant fragments, recorded ecological information, allowing researchers to map his movements and diet with incredible precision. Every piece of the glacier became a page in the story, a record of time, climate, and life in the Copper Age. The accidental nature of this preservation adds to its mystery. Ötzi was not deliberately preserved like mummies in ancient Egypt. He was the beneficiary of geography and circumstance. The glacier became both grave and archive, storing a life frozen in its final chapter. This intersection of chance and nature raises profound questions. What other histories lie concealed in glaciers, waiting for time, climate, or discovery to reveal them? How many human stories, lost to decay, might have endured if preserved in this same icy perfection? In Ötzi, we see a unique convergence of tragedy, environment, and time that creates a window into a vanished world. The preservation also transformed the scientific approach to his remains. Unlike skeletal remains, which provide limited information, Ötzi offered a complete, multidimensional record. His soft tissues revealed disease, nutrition, and trauma. His hair preserved isotopic signatures of diet and migration. His stomach offered the last meal of a man who lived in the Alps over 5,000 years ago. The tools and clothing, intact and analyzable, gave insight into culture, skill, and technology. In every respect, Ötzi was not merely a discovery. He was a portal into prehistoric human life, one frozen so perfectly that it seemed to defy time itself. Ice is a harsh but impartial archivist. It preserves without bias, freezing not only the heroic and extraordinary, but the mundane and personal. Ötzi's body carries the scars of everyday life, the healed cuts, the small injuries, the strain of carrying tools across mountains. It shows not just the violence that ended him, but the endurance, the resourcefulness, and the intelligence required to survive in one of Europe's most extreme environments. In this sense, the glacier tells a complete story, capturing both triumph and tragedy, human agency and the impartiality of nature. Yet the glacier was not static. Over the centuries, shifting ice, snow accumulation, and melting altered the landscape around Ötzi, slowly moving him from the site of death to the eventual discovery location in 1991. These geological processes, often imperceptible over human lifetimes, contributed to the final unearthing, bringing a frozen narrative to light at the precise moment it could be studied with modern science. The interplay of glacial movement and environmental change illustrates that history is not only a human story, but a story of the Earth itself, of forces that shape, preserve, and reveal. The process of discovery adds another layer to the drama. When hikers stumbled upon his body, partially exposed by melting ice, they had no way of knowing the significance of what they had found. At first, the remains were assumed to be recent. Only careful forensic and radiocarbon analysis revealed the truth. This was a man who had lived over 5,000 years earlier. The ice had concealed him, protecting every detail from time, decay, and human interference, until the moment was right. In a sense, Ötzi's story is also a story of patience. The glacier as a long-suffering guardian of memory, waiting millennia for his message to be heard. The preservation extends beyond biology into culture and technology. Every tool, garment, and artifact was locked in place, offering insight into skill, craftsmanship, and daily life. The copper axe, for instance, survived the ice almost perfectly, revealing techniques of smelting, shaping, and polishing that suggest trade networks and technological sophistication previously underestimated for the Copper Age. Even the stitching on his garments remained intact, demonstrating methods and materials that hint at social knowledge and shared practice. The glacier's icy grip preserved both human ingenuity and the human story, a time capsule unparalleled in archaeology. In this frozen preservation, there is also an emotional resonance. Modern observers cannot help but imagine Ötzi's final moments, his struggle, and the environment that both nurtured and ended him. The ice, while indifferent, preserves a profoundly human story. It allows us to empathize, to connect across millennia, to experience awe and sorrow for a life ended violently yet preserved so completely. The glacier is both a literal and symbolic medium, freezing not only flesh and artifacts but the narrative itself. A narrative that challenges our understanding of prehistory and our place in the continuum of human experience. Finally, Ötzi's preservation reminds us of the fragility and endurance of human life. In death, he became immortal in ways few could have imagined. The glacier, in its slow, impartial accumulation of ice and snow, became a storyteller, carrying forward evidence of diet, travel, injury, culture, and social context. Through him, we glimpse the interconnectedness of human life and environment, of intention and circumstance, of mortality and memory. The ice preserved not just a body, but a narrative, a voice, and a mystery that continues to captivate the imagination of the world. Frozen in the ice, Ötzi was not merely a body. He was a window into the health, disease, and physiology of humans 5,000 years ago. Modern science has allowed researchers to peer inside his body with an unprecedented level of detail, revealing a man shaped by his environment, yet surprisingly similar to us in vulnerability and resilience. From his arteries to his bones, from his stomach contents to the traces of disease embedded in his tissues, every aspect of his biology tells a story, not just of a single individual but of the broader human condition in the Copper Age. The first revelations came from his teeth and bones. Dental analysis revealed significant wear, consistent with a diet that included coarse grains and unprocessed food. Tiny particles embedded in enamel suggested he consumed stone-ground cereals mixed with grit, a byproduct of primitive milling. His bones showed signs of physical stress, minor arthritis, and healed injuries, evidence of a life of labor and endurance. Every scar and worn joint reflected movement across rugged terrain, lifting, carrying, hunting, and surviving in a landscape both beautiful and brutal. The wear patterns created a portrait of resilience, demonstrating that the human body, even in prehistoric times, was shaped profoundly by its daily demands. But the story of Ötzi's health is more complex. Analysis of his arteries revealed the surprising presence of atherosclerosis, a hardening of the arteries, previously thought to be a modern disease caused by diet and sedentary lifestyle. This discovery challenged long-held assumptions about ancient humans, revealing that environmental factors, genetics, and possibly even chronic stress played a role in disease across time. The Iceman, though physically fit and active, was not immune to the vulnerabilities inherent in human biology. His body reminds us that health and illness are timeless companions, shaping life, death, and society in ways we are only beginning to understand. Microscopic examination of his stomach and intestines revealed parasites, including whipworm, a common infection in pre-modern populations. These findings illuminate the interplay between humans and their environment, showing how survival was not only about avoiding predators or navigating harsh landscapes, but also about managing invisible threats. Life in the Copper Age was a delicate balance, a constant negotiation with forces seen and unseen. Ötzi's preserved intestines offer evidence of the microscopic dangers that were as real as the arrow that ended his life, providing an intimate look at the unseen challenges of prehistoric survival. The contents of his stomach offered more than dietary clues. They revealed patterns of behavior and adaptation. Ötzi's last meal included a combination of grains, meat, and plant matter, suggesting a calculated effort to balance energy, nutrition, and sustainability. The inclusion of wild herbs may have had medicinal purposes, implying an understanding of natural remedies. Even in a world without written records, this evidence suggests knowledge passed across generations. Which plants to eat, which to avoid, and how to combine resources to sustain life in an unforgiving environment. His body becomes a living manuscript of survival strategies, encoded in flesh, preserved by ice. Moreover, researchers discovered evidence of chronic injury and adaptation. Cuts and bruises on his hands, minor fractures, and healed wounds tell a story of repeated physical challenges and remarkable recovery. These marks reveal a life of skill, labor, and resilience, one in which injuries were commonplace yet survived through knowledge, care, and endurance. Each scar is both a testament to survival and a subtle message about the demands of human life in a time when every day carried risk. Ötzi's preserved wounds allow us to reconstruct not just a single event, but the rhythm of a lifetime shaped by activity, environment, and ingenuity. Even his lungs and heart provided insights. The calcification observed in his arteries hints at lifestyle factors, including diet and physical exertion, while the examination of his lungs shows traces of smoke exposure, likely from indoor fires used for warmth and cooking. This detail offers a glimpse into the domestic life of Copper Age humans, revealing how daily practices, necessary for survival, also introduced long-term health challenges. The evidence underscores the complexity of prehistoric life, blending necessity, innovation, and unintended consequences in ways that resonate even today. The analysis of Ötzi's hair revealed patterns of isotopes that mapped his movements and diet over months before his death. By studying the chemical signatures embedded in hair, researchers could track seasonal changes in food sources and environmental exposure, creating a timeline of behavior and movement. These subtle markers extend our understanding of his life, showing a man deeply connected to his environment, responsive to seasonal rhythms, and engaged in complex survival strategies that required both intelligence and adaptability. Each strand of hair becomes a record of life, a frozen diary of existence etched in protein. Beyond physical health, the evidence hints at social and cultural dimensions. The care evident in his clothing, the skill reflected in his tools, and the placement of tattoos suggest an individual who was integrated into a community with knowledge systems, traditions, and roles. Chronic injuries and adaptations indicate not only personal resilience but also social support, as recovery and survival often required cooperation. In this sense, Ötzi's health reveals both the vulnerability and interdependence of early humans, illuminating a society where life was hard, yet knowledge, skill, and collaboration created pathways for endurance. What makes Ötzi's preserved health extraordinary is the convergence of detail and context. He is not just a mummy or skeleton. He is a complete, dynamic individual whose biology, lifestyle, and social context are interwoven. From microscopic parasites to macroscopic trauma, every aspect of his body speaks to the realities of Copper Age life. We learn about survival strategies, social roles, dietary adaptations, environmental pressures, and human ingenuity, all encoded in flesh, preserved in ice, and unveiled through modern science. His body is a narrative, a biography written in skin, bone, and tissue, waiting to be interpreted. In the end, the story of Ötzi's health reminds us of the universality of human experience. He was a man who faced environmental extremes, social dynamics, and biological vulnerability, challenges that resonate across millennia. The diseases he carried, the injuries he endured, and the adaptations he employed highlight the continuity of human resilience. Despite the vast gulf of time, we see in him a reflection of ourselves, a life governed by the same desires, fears, and needs that shape human existence today. The Iceman's preserved health allows us not only to study the past but to understand the enduring traits that define humanity. Ötzi's frozen body is therefore more than an archaeological treasure. It is a human story, a testimony to survival, struggle, and adaptation. Every wound, every parasite, every sign of wear and disease forms a chapter in a narrative that stretches across 5,000 years, connecting the present with a lifelong past. In studying his health, we are not merely reconstructing biology. We are reconstructing the essence of daily life in the Copper Age, illuminated by the extraordinary gift of preservation. Ötzi's clothing, tools, and weaponry offer one of the most intimate glimpses into the life of a Copper Age human, revealing ingenuity, cultural knowledge, and survival strategies encoded in every stitch and edge. His garments were carefully constructed, designed not only for warmth, but for mobility, protection, and adaptability in one of Europe's most extreme environments. The cloak, made of woven grass and leather, combined insulation with flexibility, demonstrating a nuanced understanding of materials and their properties. Beneath it, multiple layers of hide clothing, expertly tanned and stitched, provided additional warmth while allowing freedom of movement. Every layer was deliberate, reflecting centuries of refinement and accumulated knowledge about living in alpine conditions. The leather leggings and shoes, in particular, are masterpieces of prehistoric engineering. The shoes were stuffed with dried grasses, creating insulation against frost and cushioning the soles against jagged rocks. The shape suggests careful tailoring to the foot, with laces and bindings designed to hold the structure together while allowing for mobility. These were not makeshift garments. They were precision tools optimized for survival in icy, unforgiving terrain. Even the tiniest details, such as the direction of stitching or the selection of materials, reflect a culture of observation, experimentation, and refinement that modern humans often underestimate in prehistoric societies. Every item he carried told a story beyond mere function. His copper axe, for instance, was more than a tool. It was a symbol of status, skill, and connectivity. Copper in the Alps was rare and required knowledge of mining, smelting, and shaping. The axe shows evidence of careful casting, polishing, and maintenance, suggesting it was valued, not disposable. It was both a utilitarian instrument for cutting and a possible marker of social standing, reflecting the interwoven nature of technology, survival, and culture in the Copper Age. This artifact demonstrates that prehistoric humans were capable of advanced craftsmanship, understanding metallurgy, and social signaling, all encoded in a single, tangible object. The flint knife he carried was similarly multifunctional. Used for hunting, skinning, and everyday tasks, it was carefully sharpened and maintained, its shape designed to maximize efficiency. Alongside the knife were tools for fire-making, scrapers for working hides, and other implements critical to daily life. Each tool reflects specialized knowledge and deliberate selection, chosen to meet specific needs. Together, they paint a portrait of a man prepared for both routine survival and extraordinary challenges, a human equipped not only physically but intellectually to navigate his world. Even the quiver of arrows reveals layers of ingenuity. Each arrowhead was shaped and attached with precision, designed to strike with lethality. The choice of wood, the fletching, and the careful shaping of tips suggest knowledge of flight mechanics and hunting strategy. These were not generic projectiles, they were tools honed for efficiency and effectiveness, tailored to prey, terrain, and circumstance. In the context of Ötzi's violent death, the arrows also underscore the dual nature of technology. The same ingenuity that allows sustenance and survival can be turned toward violence, a sobering reminder of the complexities of human behavior across millennia. Clothing and tools also provide insight into cultural identity. The placement of stitches, the selection of materials, and even decorative choices in his garments may reflect shared practices, teaching, and social conventions. These were skills learned and passed down, part of a collective human knowledge that extended beyond mere survival. Ötzi's ensemble is therefore not only functional but cultural, encoding traditions, expertise, and community in tangible form. Every thread and fiber is a testament to the human desire not just to live, but to transmit understanding, mastery, and connection across generations. Perhaps most striking is the coherence between his tools, clothing, and environment. Nothing about his equipment was arbitrary. Each item complemented another, creating a system optimized for mobility, warmth, and survival. His shoes, leggings, and cloak allowed him to traverse icy passes. His tools enabled him to hunt, gather, and maintain life. His weapons protected him from threats. The integration of these elements demonstrates strategic thinking and adaptation, reflecting an understanding of cause and effect, of risk and mitigation. Ötzi's life was not reactive but deliberate, shaped by foresight and skill honed over years. The preservation of these items in ice allowed modern researchers to analyze techniques, materials, and design with unparalleled detail. Stitching patterns reveal not only method but ergonomics, where patterns on tools indicate frequency and purpose of use. Residues on knives and scrapers hint at diet and activity. Even microscopic traces of plants and animals on garments and tools expand the narrative, showing the interconnectedness of life, work, and environment. Through his possessions, Ötzi communicates directly across time, offering a vivid, tactile narrative of a life lived with intelligence, skill, and purpose. Yet beyond functionality, there is an emotional resonance in the artifacts. These were possessions chosen, maintained, and carried with care. They represent forethought, planning, and an intimate relationship with one's tools and environment. In studying them, we gain not just technical knowledge, but insight into the human mind, the capacity for strategy, for learning, for valuing objects not only for utility but for identity and survival. Every stitch, scrape, and polish is a reflection of character, revealing the depth of thought and feeling in a world we often assume was purely pragmatic. The weapons also raise questions about status, conflict, and social structure. Was Ötzi a respected hunter, a craftsman, a leader? The quality of his copper axe and the sophistication of his flint tools suggest he was more than an average individual. He may have held a specific role in his community, one that required skill, knowledge, and perhaps leadership. His equipment may have been a symbol, a marker of competence, or a signal to allies and rivals alike. The artifacts thus operate on multiple levels: practical, social, and symbolic, each layer contributing to a fuller understanding of his life and times. Finally, Ötzi's preserved tools and clothing illustrate the extraordinary relationship between humans and environment. Every piece is evidence of adaptation, innovation, and resilience. They remind us that survival is not simply a matter of brute force, but of intelligence, planning, and understanding. The Iceman's life, encoded in these artifacts, transcends time to teach a lesson about human creativity, resourcefulness, and ingenuity. His tools and garments are not just remnants. They are storytellers, whispering across millennia of skill, culture, and the persistent human will to endure. Through the careful study of Ötzi's possessions, we begin to reconstruct the complex web of life he navigated. The choices he made, the knowledge he carried, the strategies he employed to survive in a perilous environment. Clothing, weapons, and tools together reveal a man fully engaged with his world, thoughtful, resourceful, and deeply human. They provide insight not only into individual survival, but into social structures, trade networks, and the transfer of knowledge. In this way, Ötzi becomes more than a frozen corpse. He is a messenger, carrying forward lessons about adaptation, ingenuity, and the human story, preserved in ice, waiting to be understood. One of the most enigmatic and captivating aspects of Ötzi's preserved body is the intricate pattern of tattoos etched across his skin. These markings are not decorative in the way we might think of modern body art. They are subtle, composed of thin lines and crosses placed on his lower back, knees, ankles, and wrists. Under infrared and ultraviolet light, they become visible, revealing a deliberate and purposeful pattern. The placement and form of these tattoos have fascinated scientists, anthropologists, and historians alike, offering a rare window into the interplay of health, ritual, and identity in a world long past. Unlike contemporary tattooing practices, Ötzi's marks were created using a method known as carbon tattooing. Carbon, derived from soot, was inserted beneath the skin via fine incisions. This technique suggests knowledge not only of materials but of the human body. Researchers have noted that many of the tattoos are located at sites corresponding to acupuncture points or areas associated with pain, stress, or disease. It is possible that they were intended as a form of therapeutic intervention, an ancient attempt to treat ailments like joint pain or arthritis. The lines on his lower back and knees, for example, correspond to areas where he exhibited signs of chronic strain, suggesting an intimate connection between his tattoos and his health. This functional interpretation transforms our understanding of prehistoric medicine. It suggests that Copper Age humans had developed sophisticated methods of treatment and body awareness, a knowledge encoded not in books but in practice, observation, and experience. The tattoos were more than symbolic or aesthetic. They were a living map of health, a guide to healing, and perhaps even a record of communal medical knowledge passed down through generations. Ötzi becomes, in this sense, not merely a patient, but a participant in a system of care and understanding that reflects early human ingenuity. Yet, the possibility of therapeutic intent is not the only interpretation. Some researchers have proposed that the tattoos may have held spiritual or symbolic significance. Marking the body with patterns could have been a rite of passage, a protective ritual, or an assertion of identity within a social group. The repetition of crosses and lines suggests intentionality and structure, hinting at a shared cultural or religious language. In a time without written records, the body itself may have served as canvas and manuscript, communicating knowledge, beliefs, and status. Each tattoo becomes a silent statement, a message transmitted across millennia, linking Ötzi to a broader human story of meaning, ritual, and identity. The combination of therapeutic and symbolic interpretations is particularly compelling. It suggests that for Ötzi and his people, the body was both practical and spiritual, a vessel for survival and a canvas for culture. This duality is echoed in his tools, clothing, and diet. Every aspect of life blended function and meaning, survival and expression. The tattoos, etched permanently into skin, become the most personal and intimate record of this philosophy, a mark of human ingenuity and care that endures even after death. Infrared imaging and microscopic analysis of the tattoos revealed even more subtle details. The depth of each incision, the distribution of carbon particles, and the alignment with anatomical features suggest a highly deliberate process. These were not casual or haphazard scratches. They were executed with knowledge and intention, perhaps by a healer, shaman, or skilled practitioner within his community. The precision and placement indicate that tattooing was a considered practice, likely part of a larger system of knowledge about the body, health, and ritual. Each line becomes a clue, a thread linking Ötzi to the minds and hands of those around him. The tattoos also invite reflection on pain, endurance, and resilience. The process of creating them would have been uncomfortable, possibly even painful, yet Ötzi bore them. This act, whether undertaken voluntarily or as part of a cultural ritual, demonstrates a human capacity to endure for perceived benefit, whether physical, spiritual, or social. It is a reminder that the human experience of pain, sacrifice, and adaptation is not new. It is timeless. These markings, preserved in ice, carry not only scientific significance but profound human resonance. connecting modern observers to the lived experience of someone 5,000 years ago. Beyond personal or therapeutic significance, the tattoos may also have been a form of communication. In small, closely knit communities, markings on the body could indicate social role, achievements, or experiences. They may have conveyed knowledge to others, serving as a permanent record of medical practice, tribal identity, or status within the group. In this sense, Ötzi's tattoos are both personal and social, bridging individual health, community knowledge, and cultural expression. They provide a rare insight into how early humans negotiated the intersections of body, identity, and society. The spatial distribution of the tattoos is also telling. Many appear along the spine and joints, areas under mechanical stress or associated with pain. Others are on the wrists and ankles, perhaps indicating points for mobility or ritual significance. This pattern suggests an awareness of the human body as a system, where health, movement, and energy could be influenced by specific interventions. Modern parallels to acupuncture, massage, or physiotherapy emerge in the archaeological record, hinting at a level of sophistication in understanding the human body that challenges assumptions about prehistoric knowledge. In a larger sense, the tattoos underscore the interplay of life, death, and memory. They transform Ötzi's body from a passive archaeological specimen into a living narrative, where pain, healing, identity, and belief converge. The ice preserves not only flesh and bone, but intention, care, and cultural practice. Through these markings, we glimpse a humanity that is both familiar and distant, practical and symbolic, grounded in survival yet reaching toward meaning. Each line etched in carbon is a word in a story that spans millennia, a narrative of life written in the medium of the body itself. Ultimately, Ötzi's tattoos remind us of the continuity of human experience. Across 5,000 years, the concerns of health, identity, and social belonging remain central to our existence. The Iceman's markings are not relics frozen in time. They are living connections to his thoughts, his suffering, and his culture. They challenge us to consider how knowledge, ritual, and human ingenuity were deeply intertwined even in an era we often assume was simple or primitive. In the quiet, frozen Alps, these marks speak across millennia, telling a story that is at once scientific, historical, and profoundly human. Through the study of his tattoos, we come to understand that Ötzi was more than a hunter, more than a victim of violence. He was a human being navigating health, culture, and identity in a complex world. The lines on his skin preserve wisdom, pain, and practice, and they remind us that even in prehistory, humans sought to understand, heal, and express themselves. In this way, the tattoos are both an archaeological treasure and a deeply human testament, connecting us to the lived experience of a man frozen in time, whose body, even in death, continues to teach, challenge, and inspire. The discovery of Ötzi's body in September 1991 was a moment that seemed almost scripted by fate. High in the Ötzi Alps, near the border between Austria and Italy, hikers Helmut and Erika Simon were traversing a glacier when they stumbled upon a body partially exposed by melting ice. At first, the remains appeared recent, like a climber lost or a hiker overcome by the harsh mountain environment. The cold, wind-swept silence of the glacier seemed to hold its breath, as if guarding a secret waiting to be revealed. What no one yet realized was that this frozen figure would rewrite the story of human life in the Copper Age, providing an unprecedented portal into a world long vanished. The initial reaction was disbelief. The body was remarkably intact, clothed, and accompanied by tools that were clearly ancient. Rescue teams and authorities approached cautiously, unsure whether they were dealing with a recent accident or a preserved archaeological treasure. The glacier had preserved more than just a corpse. It had preserved a narrative, one that could be read through science, forensic analysis, and careful observation. Every wrinkle in his clothing, every wound, every artifact became a word in a story that spanned millennia. The icy silence of the Alps, which had held him captive for thousands of years, was finally broken. The body's condition was immediately striking. Unlike skeletal remains commonly found at archaeological sites, this man was fully preserved. Skin, hair, fingernails, clothing, and tools survived the passage of time, offering an almost cinematic tableau of life and death frozen in the high mountains. Scientists quickly realized that this was no ordinary find. Radiocarbon dating placed him at more than 5,000 years old, firmly in the Copper Age. The implications were staggering. Here was a human being, preserved through millennia, providing a level of detail in his biology, environment, and culture that had never before been encountered. Media attention followed swiftly, bringing Ötzi into the global spotlight. Headlines emphasized the frozen mummy or the Iceman, capturing the imagination of scientists, historians, and the general public alike. Yet beneath the sensationalism, researchers began the painstaking work of documenting, analyzing, and preserving the site and the body. The glacier, a natural tomb, demanded careful handling. Even as scientists worked to remove him from the ice, they had to ensure that the fragile preservation that had lasted millennia was not destroyed in hours. Every movement, every touch, was deliberate, echoing the delicate balance between human curiosity and the frozen legacy of nature. Initial forensic examinations revealed both expected and extraordinary details. The arrow in his shoulder, the cuts and bruises, and the evidence of chronic injuries were immediately noted. Clothing and tools were catalogued, revealing craftsmanship, utility, and status. The copper axe, flint knife, and quiver of arrows were preserved almost perfectly, each object offering insight into technological skill, social standing, and survival strategy. The clothing, layered with leather and grass, indicated sophisticated understanding of insulation and protection in alpine conditions. Every item spoke to a life meticulously prepared for the challenges of the mountains. Public fascination was matched by scientific intrigue. Forensic teams employed techniques ranging from X-rays to CT scans, chemical analyses to isotopic studies. Each test revealed new information: the man's diet, movements, diseases, and even traces of medicinal plants. The glacier had preserved not just a body, but an encyclopedia of human life from a period about which little was previously known. The initial discovery opened doors to insights about ancient human health, migration, social structure, and technology, transforming Ötzi from a frozen relic into a dynamic subject of study whose story could be reconstructed in remarkable detail. The site of discovery also presented its own challenges and mysteries. The glacier's constant movement and seasonal melting meant that Ötzi had been gradually exposed, likely over decades, with portions of the body emerging at different times. This raised questions about how long he had been visible before discovery and whether other artifacts or remains lay hidden nearby. Archaeologists had to work quickly to document the site, preserving context as carefully as the body itself. Each layer of ice, sediment, and debris became part of the narrative, holding clues to both his final journey and the forces of nature that had preserved him for millennia. The removal of Ötzi from the glacier was a delicate operation, fraught with both logistical and ethical challenges. Ensuring that the body, along with its precious clothing and tools, remained intact required precise planning and execution. Even the slightest misstep could have caused irreparable damage, destroying centuries of preservation. Scientists and conservators worked in tandem, employing controlled temperatures and protective measures, creating a careful choreography that reflected the extraordinary value of this discovery. In a sense, the glacier was reluctant to give up its secret, demanding respect and patience from those who sought to study it. Public fascination intensified as details of the discovery emerged. The fact that a man could survive, travel, and eventually die in such an inhospitable environment captured the imagination of people around the world. Media coverage emphasized the mystery, the violence, and the exceptional preservation, often highlighting the romantic or heroic aspects of Ötzi's life and death. Yet for scientists, the discovery represented far more than a story. It was a living laboratory, a frozen archive that allowed them to reconstruct life in unprecedented detail. Every bruise, every tool, every fiber of clothing became evidence of skill, survival, and human resilience. The discovery also raised profound philosophical and cultural questions. What responsibilities do we have toward such ancient remains? How do we balance scientific inquiry with respect for the dead? Ötzi's emergence from the ice forced a dialogue about the ethics of preservation, exhibition, and study, reminding us that these are not merely objects, but once-living humans whose stories deserve dignity and consideration. His frozen body became a bridge between past and present, inviting reflection on mortality, survival, and the continuity of human experience. Finally, the discovery marked the beginning of an enduring legacy. Ötzi's presence transformed the understanding of the Copper Age, challenging assumptions about diet, medicine, social organization, and technology. It inspired generations of researchers and captivated the global public, creating a story that blends mystery, science, and humanity. In the silent, cold mountains where he had lain for millennia, Ötzi's frozen body had finally emerged, telling a story as vivid and compelling as life itself. A story that would continue to unfold as each new analysis revealed deeper layers of human ingenuity, struggle, and resilience. The first analyses of Ötzi's DNA marked a revolution in our understanding of human genetics and prehistoric life. Unlike any previous discovery, his preserved tissues offered scientists a chance to peer directly into the genetic blueprint of a person who lived over 5,000 years ago. In those fragile strands of DNA lay answers to questions that had long tantalized archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians. Where did he come from? What diseases did he carry? How was his ancestry connected to modern populations? Each test, each sequence, opened a window into a world that had been frozen in ice, allowing researchers to trace the threads of human history with unprecedented precision. One of the first revelations from his genetic analysis was his ancestry. Ötzi's DNA suggested a lineage that connected him to populations in southern Europe, particularly the regions that now constitute Italy and the Eastern Alps. This discovery illuminated migration patterns, showing that human populations in the Copper Age were far more interconnected than previously believed. Trade, travel, and communication over long distances were not only possible but actively practiced, challenging earlier assumptions that prehistoric communities were isolated and static. His genome became a map of human movement, revealing networks of interaction, adaptation, and shared culture that had survived only in genetic memory. The analysis of his DNA also revealed surprising health information. Researchers identified genetic markers indicating susceptibility to cardiovascular disease, a finding that was particularly startling, as it contradicted the notion that atherosclerosis was solely a modern affliction. Even in a life of physical exertion and natural diet, Ötzi carried vulnerabilities embedded in his genome, showing that the intersection of genetics and environment has always influenced human health. His DNA also revealed predispositions to lactose intolerance and other metabolic traits, offering insight into diet, lifestyle, and evolutionary adaptation. In each sequence, we see both the resilience and fragility that have always defined human existence. Perhaps most dramatically, the genetic analysis uncovered traces of pathogens and microorganisms. Ötzi's tissues contained evidence of Borrelia burgdorferi, the bacterium that causes Lyme disease, marking the earliest known occurrence of this infection. He also carried intestinal parasites, including whipworm and protozoa, indicating that even the most robust and physically capable humans were susceptible to invisible threats. These findings illustrate the continuous struggle between humans and microbes, a battle that has shaped evolution, behavior, and survival for millennia. In a sense, Ötzi becomes a testament not only to human ingenuity but to the enduring presence of the microscopic world in our lives. The combination of ancestry, health, and pathogen analysis painted a portrait of a man at once familiar and extraordinary. His genetic profile reflects both continuity and change, the roots of modern populations, the persistence of ancient vulnerabilities, and the long-term impact of environment and behavior on human biology. In this way, the frozen body becomes more than a relic. It is a living laboratory, a bridge connecting past, present, and future. The DNA sequences act like threads woven through time, binding Ötzi's life to ours, revealing the intricate tapestry of human history in a form previously thought impossible to access. Beyond health and ancestry, the DNA revealed aspects of appearance and adaptation. Analysis suggested he had brown eyes and hair, with a natural resilience to cold environments, traits that likely helped him survive the harsh alpine climate. Subtle markers hinted at possible blood type and metabolic efficiency, offering clues to his endurance and physical capabilities. Through this molecular lens, Ötzi's genetic identity became vivid. Not just a body frozen in ice, but a person with traits, vulnerabilities, and adaptations shaped by both inheritance and circumstance. It is a reminder that prehistoric humans were fully complex beings, facing challenges and making choices shaped by biology, culture, and environment. The discovery of his mitochondrial DNA also provided insight into maternal lineage and population history. By comparing Ötzi's genome with those of modern populations, researchers were able to trace ancient connections and divergence patterns. These comparisons revealed how human populations moved, mixed, and adapted over thousands of years, highlighting the interconnectedness of prehistoric Europe. Ötzi's DNA became a living record of ancestry, connecting him to people thousands of kilometers away, across regions and generations. This genetic connectivity transforms our understanding of prehistoric social networks, trade, and migration, suggesting a dynamic and interwoven world. The insights from DNA analysis also extended to his microbiome and gut flora. By studying preserved stomach and intestinal contents, scientists reconstructed aspects of his diet and digestion, revealing a mix of grains, meats, and wild plants. The microbial communities preserved in his gut reflect interactions between diet, environment, and health, illustrating the delicate balance humans maintained with nature. The information provides a vivid picture of lifestyle and survival strategies. A man moving through mountains, consuming what the land offered, and relying on both physical strength and knowledge to endure. Each DNA fragment is a clue, a microscopic messenger from a distant past. What makes these discoveries remarkable is not just the data, but the narrative they construct. Ötzi's DNA allows us to see a life that is at once ordinary and extraordinary. A man navigating family, community, and environment, confronting disease and injury, hunting and traveling across alpine terrain, and ultimately meeting a violent end. The combination of ancestry, health, microbiology, and physical evidence allows researchers to reconstruct his world in 3 dimensions, providing insights that are both scientific and deeply human. Ötzi's genome, like his body, becomes a storyteller, speaking of life, struggle, and resilience in a language that bridges millennia. In addition, the DNA findings provoke broader reflections about the human condition. They remind us that genetics, environment, and behavior are inseparable, shaping not only our physical traits but our vulnerabilities, adaptations, and survival strategies. They also show that even in a remote and ancient world, human beings were interconnected, mobile, and socially complex. Ötzi is both unique and representative, a singular life frozen in ice, yet a reflection of universal human experience. His DNA preserves memory, adaptation, and identity, allowing us to read the story of a life in ways that no other archaeological find has ever permitted. Ultimately, the genetic revelations reinforce the extraordinary significance of Ötzi as a time traveler across science and history. His preserved DNA allows us to reconstruct a life with unprecedented clarity, linking a man from the Copper Age directly to the human story today. Every nucleotide sequence, every mutation, every marker becomes part of a narrative that is at once intimate and grand, scientific and emotional. Through the molecular traces of his existence, Ötzi teaches us about survival, adaptation, vulnerability, and resilience, inviting us to connect with a human being whose life, though separated by thousands of years, continues to resonate powerfully with the present. The story of Ötzi's death is as compelling as his life, and perhaps even more mysterious. For decades, scientists debated the circumstances that led to the Copper Age man's violent end. His body, frozen in time, preserves a record of trauma and violence, a silent testimony that invites forensic analysis and historical speculation. The arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder, combined with defensive wounds and blunt force injuries, suggests not an accident, but a deliberate act, a fatal confrontation that ended a life that had already endured so much. Every wound, scar, and bruise tells a story of danger, betrayal, and human conflict, frozen forever in the alpine ice. Forensic reconstruction provides a chilling glimpse into the final moments of his life. The arrow, embedded deep in his shoulder, would have caused immediate pain and loss of function. It likely severed major vessels and muscles, immobilizing him and preventing escape. Yet he did not die instantly. Evidence suggests he managed to move, perhaps seeking shelter or attempting to find safety, leaving traces of struggle across the snow and ice. Defensive cuts on his hands and arms indicate he may have attempted to fend off an assailant, a final act of instinct and survival. In this frozen tableau, Ötzi becomes both victim and participant, a human caught in the tension between agency and vulnerability. The arrow's design and placement reveal not only the lethality but also the intent behind the attack. The flint tip was carefully shaped, with evidence of sharpening and preparation. The angle of impact and penetration suggest it was fired at close range, aimed with precision, implying knowledge, skill, and perhaps premeditation. This was not a random encounter. It was a targeted act of violence. The circumstances raise questions about social dynamics, territorial disputes, or personal conflict. In Ötzi's final hours, the intersection of human intention and natural environment created a scenario as tragic as it was consequential, ultimately freezing both the individual and the mystery for millennia. Beyond the arrow, additional injuries provide insight into the struggle. Bruises, abrasions, and cuts on the back of his hands suggest defensive action, while contusions on his head indicate blunt force trauma, perhaps a blow that disoriented or incapacitated him. These injuries reveal a story of confrontation, one that escalated to fatal consequences. They also demonstrate the limits of human endurance. Even a skilled, physically capable man could not overcome the combination of human aggression, environmental challenges, and the vulnerabilities imposed by nature and circumstance. Every injury is a fragment of narrative, a detail preserved with haunting clarity by the glacier. The context of his death remains elusive. Some researchers have proposed that Ötzi was involved in a social dispute, possibly even homicide, reflecting the tensions and complexities of prehistoric human life. Competition over resources, personal grievances, or conflicts within a small community could have motivated violence. Others suggest he may have been fleeing or ambushed, his skills and tools insufficient to protect him in the moment. The ambiguity adds to the drama. A man fully equipped for survival, intelligent and resourceful, yet ultimately vulnerable to forces beyond his control. The ice holds these secrets tightly, allowing us glimpses, but never full certainty. Yet the injuries alone do not tell the complete story. Analysis of his final movements, determined through careful study of wound trajectories and blood residue, paints a picture of a desperate attempt at survival. It appears that he may have tried to seek shelter, leaving evidence of movement and struggle across the icy terrain. This moment of human instinct, the drive to endure, even in the face of fatal injury, echoes across millennia, connecting modern observers to the raw immediacy of life and death. Ötzi's final hours remind us that survival is a complex interplay of skill, circumstance, and chance, and that even the most prepared individuals remain vulnerable to the unpredictable nature of human conflict. The murder weapon itself is a testament to the sophistication of Copper Age technology. The flint arrowhead shows evidence of deliberate shaping and refinement, optimized for penetration and lethality. It reflects not just craftsmanship but strategic thinking, knowledge of anatomy, and an understanding of human physiology. The use of such a tool in a premeditated attack suggests a world in which violence was not merely opportunistic, but considered, deliberate, and potentially ritualized. Every detail of the weapon, from shape to placement, reveals both the technological capabilities and the social dynamics of the period, providing context to the human story preserved in ice. The forensic evidence also opens a window into the psychological dimensions of Ötzi's death. Defensive wounds indicate fear, determination, and awareness. The choice of escape routes suggests strategic thinking under duress. There is a human narrative here, a final struggle, calculated yet desperate, revealing courage, resourcefulness, and vulnerability. The ice, in preserving these details, allows us to reconstruct not only what happened but how it happened, providing insight into the cognitive and emotional state of a man facing imminent mortality. It is a level of empathy and connection rarely possible with prehistoric remains. Additionally, the evidence raises questions about social relationships and trust. If Ötzi was killed by someone known to him, a fellow member of his community, the act reflects betrayal, a theme that resonates across human history. Violence among small, tight-knit groups would have profound consequences for social cohesion, survival, and the transfer of knowledge. Ötzi's death, therefore, may not be an isolated act of aggression, but a moment with ripples across his community, illustrating the intricate social dynamics of prehistoric human life. Every wound, every arrow, becomes a symbol of tension, choice, and consequence frozen in time. The final moments also underscore the cruel impartiality of nature. The icy terrain, while preserving his body for millennia, would have compounded the effects of injury. Hypothermia, exposure, and physical trauma combined to end a life that, in another context, might have survived the immediate violence. The environment that sustained him in life, the mountains, ice, and snow, also dictated the manner of his death, creating a poignant duality. The same forces that preserved his story were complicit in the tragedy of his final hours. The Alps, indifferent yet powerful, become a character in the narrative, shaping and witnessing the last chapter of Ötzi's life. Ultimately, Ötzi's death is not only a forensic case study but a profoundly human story. It illustrates the vulnerability, courage, and resilience of prehistoric humans while highlighting the continuity of human experience. Conflict, survival, betrayal, and endurance. His final moments, preserved in ice, allow us to connect emotionally and intellectually, bridging 5,000 years of human history. In death, as in life, Ötzi becomes both subject and storyteller, offering insight into technology, society, and the human condition. The frozen tableau is a testament to mortality, ingenuity, and the mysteries that remain hidden until the right moment of revelation. Reconstructing Ötzi's final journey is a forensic puzzle that combines archaeology, biology, and detective work, offering a vivid glimpse into the last hours of a life frozen in time. Every detail, from the trajectory of the arrow to the positioning of his body and the distribution of injuries, helps scientists piece together a narrative that is as much about human behavior as it is about survival in a harsh landscape. The frozen Alps hold the evidence, silently preserving the drama of a confrontation, the struggle of a man trying to survive, and the calculated violence that ended his life. Analysis of wound patterns and defensive injuries suggests that Ötzi may have been moving through the mountains when he was attacked. The arrow in his shoulder, which likely struck him from behind, would have immediately impaired his mobility. Yet traces of blood and bruising indicate that he continued to move, perhaps seeking a concealed or safe location. This reveals a remarkable determination to survive despite injury, highlighting the resilience and resourcefulness that had defined his life. The final journey, reconstructed through meticulous forensic study, becomes a narrative of instinct, strategy, and desperation, a last effort to navigate a world that had turned against him. Pathologists have examined the angle and placement of the arrow in extraordinary detail. The trajectory suggests it was fired at close range, likely by someone with skill and intention. It struck at the back of the left shoulder, piercing muscle and puncturing a major vessel. This placement implies knowledge of anatomy, as the goal was clearly incapacitation or death. Combined with defensive wounds on the hands, forearms, and head, the evidence paints a picture of an ambush, a planned attack rather than an impulsive act of violence. The level of sophistication required for such a strike hints at social dynamics in the Copper Age that were complex, potentially involving personal grievances, disputes over territory, or intergroup conflict. Ötzi's final movements can also be inferred from the patterns of bruising and microtrauma preserved in his body. Minor injuries to his back and lower limbs suggest he may have fallen or struggled on uneven terrain after being wounded. Evidence of bleeding under the skin indicates that he was alive for a significant period after the initial attack, moving and attempting to defend himself. These details, combined with his clothing and equipment, allow researchers to reconstruct a dynamic narrative. A man who, despite injury, remained active, aware, and determined in his last hours. The glacier preserved not just his death, but the drama, tension, and desperation of those moments. The tools and clothing he carried also provide clues about the context of his final journey. His well-prepared shoes and layered garments suggest he had intended to traverse the mountains, perhaps on a mission or routine journey. The copper axe, flint knife, and arrows indicate readiness for both sustenance and defense. These artifacts, when combined with evidence of violence, suggest that his death was not random. He was a man prepared, yet vulnerable to the unexpected actions of another human, illustrating the precarious balance between skill, preparation, and the unpredictable dangers of social interaction in a prehistoric world. Forensic teams have also examined the broader environment in which the attack occurred. The Ötzi Alps are a region of extreme weather, steep slopes, and treacherous ice, which would have complicated any struggle. Movement under such conditions is slow and exhausting, meaning that an incapacitating wound, such as the arrow in the shoulder, would be catastrophic. Ötzi's survival for even a short period after the injury demonstrates extraordinary physical endurance and adaptation to his environment. This interplay between human physiology and environmental constraints highlights the continuous negotiation between the body, landscape, and circumstance that defines survival in extreme conditions. Several theories have emerged regarding the motive for the attack. Some researchers suggest interpersonal conflict, possibly involving a dispute over resources or social standing. Others propose a targeted assassination, perhaps due to jealousy, rivalry, or perceived threat within a small community. There is also speculation that the attack may have had ritualistic or symbolic elements, reflecting social norms or belief systems in the Copper Age. While the precise motive remains elusive, the evidence indicates a deliberate, premeditated act, situating Ötzi's death within the broader context of human social complexity rather than random misfortune. The reconstruction of his final moments also sheds light on human psychology and decision-making under duress. Defensive wounds reveal instinctive reactions, calculated attempts to shield vital areas, and perhaps even strategic positioning to minimize harm. The fact that Ötzi continued to move after sustaining a mortal wound demonstrates the interplay of survival instinct, cognitive function, and physical capability. He was thinking, acting, and reacting in a high-stress situation, bridging a gap of 5,000 years to reveal the universality of human experience in moments of extreme threat. Interestingly, the evidence suggests that he may have been familiar with the terrain. The route he took after the attack indicates knowledge of safe paths, shelters, or advantageous positions, reflecting both physical fitness and environmental awareness. This situational knowledge underscores the sophistication of Copper Age humans, whose survival depended on intimate familiarity with their surroundings. Ötzi's actions, reconstructed through forensic analysis, reveal a man navigating not only violence but geography, weather, and topography, demonstrating the interconnectedness of intellect, skill, and instinct in survival. Finally, the meticulous forensic work has allowed researchers to combine multiple strands of evidence into a coherent narrative of the last hours of Ötzi's life. The arrow, the defensive wounds, the movement patterns, and the environment converge to form a story that is both scientifically rigorous and emotionally compelling. This reconstruction transforms the Iceman from a passive archaeological specimen into a vivid, dynamic human figure. His final journey becomes a tale of courage, strategy, vulnerability, and the stark realities of life and death in the Copper Age. Ötzi's final moments are thus preserved not only in his frozen body, but in the careful, patient work of modern science. Through the integration of forensics, archaeology, and environmental study, we can almost witness the drama of his last hours. The strike of the arrow, the struggle to survive, the movement across ice and rock, and the final surrender to forces beyond his control. This narrative transcends time, connecting modern observers to the raw immediacy of human experience. The forensic reconstruction is more than science. It is storytelling, using the body itself as both evidence and narrator, revealing courage, conflict, and mortality with cinematic clarity. After Ötzi's death, the ice of the Ötzi Alps became both tomb and time capsule, preserving his body, clothing, and tools with astonishing fidelity. The natural refrigeration of glaciers, combined with the specific conditions of the high-altitude environment, created a perfect preservation system. For centuries, the elements that might have destroyed a body, bacteria, insects, and decay, were halted by ice, locking him in a state that allowed modern science to uncover details of his life and death with unparalleled clarity. This preservation transformed a simple alpine landscape into an extraordinary archive, holding secrets of human history, culture, and biology. The post-mortem processes that froze Ötzi's body are themselves a marvel of natural engineering. At an altitude of over 3,000 meters, temperatures rarely rise above freezing. Snowfall and ice movement gradually covered him after death, sealing him from the elements. Over time, the glacier shifted, compressing and insulating the remains, while slow melting and refreezing cycles maintained a state of near-perfect preservation. Unlike burial in soil, where decomposition is inevitable, the ice acted as both shield and conservator, preventing microbial decay and retaining organic materials. Every strand of hair, every stitch in his clothing, and every edge of his tools remained intact, a frozen moment in time that would not be disturbed for millennia. The glacier's role as a natural conservator also extended to the objects Ötzi carried. His copper axe, flint knife, arrows, and clothing were all preserved alongside him. The metal remained untarnished by corrosion to a remarkable degree, and organic materials such as leather, wood, and plant fibers survived almost intact. This combination of preservation allowed scientists not only to study his anatomy but also to understand the technology, craftsmanship, and daily life of Copper Age humans. Tools that would normally deteriorate were maintained in ice, offering a tangible connection to the ingenuity and culture of a people who left no written records. Modern postmortem studies began immediately after the discovery, combining forensic science, archaeology, and emerging imaging technologies. CT scans, X-rays, and isotopic analyses revealed everything from broken bones and arterial calcification to stomach contents and parasite infestations. Each finding opened a window into Ötzi's daily life, health, and diet, demonstrating that even 5,000 years ago, humans were subject to complex interactions between biology and environment. The forensic work revealed a man who had survived harsh conditions, endured injuries, and consumed a diet tailored to the alpine environment, offering insights into both resilience and vulnerability. The preservation of ice also allowed for the detailed study of his clothing and body modifications. Tattoos, carefully etched into his skin, were visible under infrared imaging, revealing patterns potentially linked to medicinal practices, ritual significance, or social identity. Clothing made of leather, grass, and plant fibers showed complex construction methods, stitching patterns, and insulation techniques, indicating a sophisticated understanding of materials and environmental adaptation. Even the smallest artifacts, such as birch fungus for fire starting, were preserved, highlighting the meticulous attention to survival strategies. Each element paints a picture of a life deeply intertwined with environment, community, and culture. The ice did more than preserve physical evidence. It also created a narrative of human movement and environmental interaction. Glacial melting and shifts over centuries slowly revealed parts of Ötzi's body and artifacts, effectively creating a timeline of exposure that hinted at changing climate conditions. Scientists could trace not only his life and death but also the environmental context in which he lived. The glacier became a silent witness, documenting natural forces while safeguarding human history. The slow, careful revelation of his remains underscored the delicate balance between nature's power and its ability to preserve, offering a dramatic lens through which to understand the interplay of time, climate, and human experience. Postmortem studies also explored the physiological and pathological aspects of Ötzi's life. Analysis of his skeletal structure revealed arthritis in his joints, suggesting chronic physical strain consistent with a life of constant movement and labor. Evidence of healed injuries, including rib fractures, pointed to previous episodes of trauma, implying a life filled with both risk and resilience. Dental examinations revealed were patterns and cavities that provided insights into diet and nutrition. The ice had preserved not only his body but the story of a man who lived fully, worked hard, and endured both environmental and social challenges. Another key aspect of postmortem study involved the microscopic examination of stomach and intestinal contents. Scientists discovered traces of grains, meat, and plant matter, reconstructing a diet adapted to high-altitude survival. This evidence illuminated seasonal behaviors, foraging patterns, and resource utilization, suggesting that Ötzi was part of a complex subsistence economy. The preservation of these materials in ice offered a rare and unprecedented view into the daily life of Copper Age humans. It allowed researchers to move beyond speculation into concrete reconstruction of diet, activity, and even mobility patterns, transforming the frozen body into a detailed case study of prehistoric life. The ice also captured evidence of the final moments before death. Blood residue, tissue trauma, and wound patterns were all preserved with extraordinary clarity. This allowed forensic experts to reconstruct the timing and nature of injuries, the sequence of events, and the possible movements of Ötzi in his final hours. The frozen glacier served as both stage and archive, preserving a dramatic human story in minute detail. Each cut, bruise, and puncture became a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, revealed a narrative of conflict, endurance, and ultimately, mortality. The postmortem studies extended beyond the body itself to include a broader ecological and geological context. Pollen, plant fibers, and soil residues on clothing and tools provided information about the surrounding environment, including seasonal conditions, local vegetation, and human interaction with the landscape. This multi-layered preservation allowed scientists to connect Ötzi's personal story to the larger narrative of human adaptation in the Copper Age, integrating biological, technological, and environmental evidence into a coherent and compelling tableau. Ultimately, the post-mortem preservation of Ötzi illustrates a remarkable intersection of human history and natural processes. The ice of the Ötztal Alps did more than freeze a man. It created a bridge across millennia, allowing modern science to access a life, a culture, and a moment in history with unprecedented clarity. Through careful study, researchers have reconstructed not only the anatomy and artifacts but the lived experience of a Copper Age human navigating survival, technology, social dynamics, and environmental pressures. The glacier preserved a story that transcends time, linking the past to the present in a way few other discoveries have achieved. Through this post-mortem analysis, Ötzi emerges not as a distant, anonymous figure, but as a fully realized human being. His body, clothing, tools, and even stomach contents provide a window into health, culture, survival, and violence in the Copper Age. The ice preserves not only matter but meaning, transforming a frozen corpse into a narrative that speaks across millennia. In every detail, from tattoos to tools, from injuries to diet, the glacier has safeguarded the essence of a life, allowing the modern world to engage with history in an intimate, emotionally resonant, and scientifically rigorous way. The life of Ötzi is inseparable from the material culture he carried. The tools, clothing, and objects that reveal a sophisticated society navigating a harsh environment. Every item found with him was carefully crafted, functional, and adapted to the alpine terrain, reflecting the ingenuity, survival strategies, and social knowledge of Copper Age humans. From the copper axe to the birch fungus, from the layered clothing to the flint dagger, each artifact is a fragment of a larger cultural story, offering clues about technology, trade, and human behavior in a world without writing. The copper axe, arguably the most iconic of his possessions, is remarkable not only for its utility but also for its symbolism. In an era when metal was scarce and valuable, ownership of a copper blade likely conferred status and influence within his community. Analysis shows the axe had a carefully forged blade attached to a wooden handle, indicating advanced metalworking skills and knowledge of materials. The choice of copper, rather than more readily available stone, signals both technological innovation and an understanding of social signaling. Tools were not merely functional. They were extensions of identity, authority, and expertise. His flint dagger, meticulously crafted, further illustrates the balance of utility and skill. The flint blade, expertly shaped and hafted, served both as a tool and a weapon. Its preservation allows modern scientists to study not only its function but also the techniques and craftsmanship involved in its production. These objects demonstrate that prehistoric humans were not merely survivors, but innovators, capable of solving complex problems and transferring knowledge across generations. The combination of copper and flint technology underscores a society in which adaptability, resource management, and craftsmanship were essential to survival in the unforgiving Alps. Ötzi's clothing is equally telling, revealing both practical ingenuity and cultural sophistication. Layers of leather, fur, and grass provided insulation and protection from cold, wind, and precipitation, while seams and stitching demonstrate advanced tailoring skills. His shoes, designed for alpine travel, were waterproofed with grass and carefully laced for stability, reflecting an intimate understanding of materials, biomechanics, and environmental challenges. Every stitch and layer speaks of preparation, foresight, and intimate knowledge of the natural world. A culture in which survival required intelligence, observation, and careful planning. But these artifacts are more than evidence of survival. They also hint at social and economic structures. Ötzi's possessions suggest access to resources, networks of exchange, and specialized knowledge. Copper, for instance, had to be mined, smelted, and transported, implying cooperation and technical skill beyond an individual's capacity. Similarly, the quality and preparation of his clothing suggest either personal skill or the presence of artisans within his community. These details reveal a complex society in which labor, knowledge, and social roles were intertwined, challenging the assumption that prehistoric humans lived in isolated, primitive groups. Ötzi's material culture is a window into the social fabric of the Copper Age, where technology, status, and survival were deeply connected. The presence of medicinal plants and birch fungus among his belongings adds another layer to this picture. Researchers have identified evidence of natural remedies intended for gastrointestinal ailments, demonstrating a practical knowledge of herbal medicine. This suggests a community aware of the interplay between health, environment, and survival, where knowledge was shared and preserved across generations. The combination of medical knowledge, specialized tools, and functional clothing underscores a society that was adaptive, inventive, and deeply attuned to the challenges of alpine life. Ötzi's tools and possessions also hint at ritual or symbolic dimensions. The deliberate placement and quality of items may indicate social norms, spiritual beliefs, or rites of passage. The copper axe, for instance, could have been both a practical implement and a symbol of status or authority. Similarly, the craftsmanship evident in his clothing and personal items suggests pride, identity, and perhaps even artistry. These artifacts are not merely remnants of survival. They are tangible expressions of culture, bridging the practical and the symbolic in a way that reveals the richness of prehistoric life. The evidence also sheds light on the interconnectedness of prehistoric communities. Copper, flint, and other materials had to be sourced, transported, and exchanged, implying trade networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. This connectivity challenges earlier assumptions about isolated populations, suggesting that Ötzi's world was far more dynamic and interconnected than previously imagined. His tools and possessions thus act as silent witnesses to a complex web of human interaction, resource management, and cultural exchange. A sophisticated society operating in what might otherwise appear to be a remote and inhospitable environment. Clues from his equipment and artifacts also offer insight into daily life and survival strategies. The presence of a quiver of arrows, along with a partially completed bow, suggests he engaged in hunting or defense, requiring both skill and knowledge of local fauna. Flint and fire-starting materials indicate preparation for shelter, warmth, and cooking, reflecting a high level of foresight. These artifacts reveal a man navigating a challenging environment with ingenuity, observation, and adaptability, using both physical skill and intellectual resourcefulness to survive. The combination of personal items and their condition also hints at social networks and relationships. Objects that required collective effort to produce or obtain, such as the copper axe, imply the existence of community structures, roles, and hierarchies. Even subtle details, like repairs on clothing or tools, suggest that knowledge was shared and maintained, that survival was a communal endeavor as much as an individual pursuit. Ötzi's belongings therefore act as a bridge between his individual life and the society around him, revealing how technology, social structure, and culture were inseparable in the Copper Age. Ultimately, Ötzi's material culture transforms him from a frozen body into a human story. Each tool, garment, and artifact is a word in a narrative about survival, ingenuity, and identity. They reflect both the practical demands of alpine life and the social, cultural, and symbolic dimensions of his community. In this way, his possessions are not just objects. They are storytellers, preserving the rhythms, challenges, and creativity of a people who lived 5,000 years ago. Through his tools and clothing, we gain insight not only into his life but into the broader human experience, connecting us emotionally and intellectually to a past that is at once alien and familiar. In examining Ötzi's belongings, we see the intersection of survival, culture, and human ingenuity. His artifacts testify to a life of complexity, planning, and skill. They show that prehistoric humans were not merely passive observers of nature but active participants, shaping their environment, technology, and society. The material culture preserved in the ice is both a scientific resource and a human story, revealing a world where survival, identity, and culture were inseparable, and where every object carried meaning and purpose. Through his possessions, Ötzi speaks across millennia, teaching us about adaptation, creativity, and the social and cultural dimensions of human life. The copper axe, the flint knife, the quiver of arrows, the clothing, and the medicinal plants are all fragments of a narrative that continues to inspire wonder, curiosity, and empathy. They allow us to see him not as an archaeological specimen, but as a person who lived, planned, worked, and faced the challenges of his world with skill and determination. His story, preserved in ice and artifacts, continues to resonate today, a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring connection between individuals and their communities. The story of Ötzi did not end with his discovery. Rather, it marked the beginning of an ongoing scientific odyssey that continues to unfold with each new investigation. Modern technology has allowed researchers to probe deeper into his life, health, and death than ever thought possible, transforming him into one of the most studied human remains in history. Imaging techniques, molecular analyses, and experimental archaeology combine to create a multidimensional portrait, revealing secrets that the ice alone could not fully explain. Every scan, every DNA sequence, and every isotopic analysis brings Ötzi closer to us, allowing him to speak across millennia in ways that are both precise and profoundly human. One of the most striking aspects of these ongoing studies is the detailed reconstruction of his health. Using advanced CT scans, researchers have mapped his skeletal and soft tissue structures, revealing signs of arthritis, healed fractures, and even a slight spinal deformity. These findings illuminate the challenges he faced in daily life, the physical toll of hunting, traveling, and surviving in the harsh alpine environment. Yet they also highlight remarkable resilience. Despite chronic pain and previous injuries, Ötzi remained highly active, fully capable of navigating treacherous terrain and performing complex tasks. His body tells a story of endurance and adaptation, a living record of human strength and vulnerability preserved in ice. DNA analysis has continued to uncover fascinating details. Beyond ancestry and disease, researchers have identified genetic predispositions related to metabolism, immune function, and even diet. These findings allow a glimpse into the biochemical world of a Copper Age human, how he processed food, responded to pathogens, and adapted to environmental pressures. Such insights not only illuminate Ötzi's life, but also deepen our understanding of human evolution, revealing continuity and change over thousands of years. His genome acts as both a biological archive and a mirror, reflecting the interplay between heritage, environment, and survival in a world far removed from modern conveniences. Imaging technology has also revealed subtle but profound details about his lifestyle. Tattoos, long obscured by time and ice, have been mapped with infrared imaging, showing patterns along his back, arms, and legs. Scientists suggest that these marks may have served therapeutic purposes, akin to early acupuncture, intended to relieve joint pain and arthritis. Others propose symbolic or ritual meanings, connecting the physical evidence to broader cultural practices. In this way, Ötzi's body itself becomes a text, a canvas upon which the stories of his health, beliefs, and identity are written in patterns of ink and skin, preserved for thousands of years. Isotopic analyses of his teeth, bones, and hair have provided additional layers of understanding. By examining ratios of specific isotopes, researchers have traced his diet over seasons and years, identifying periods of high meat consumption, plant-based nutrition, and even migratory patterns. These chemical signatures act as a record of mobility, trade, and environmental adaptation. They reveal that Ötzi was not stationary. He traveled through diverse landscapes, interacted with different ecosystems, and relied on sophisticated knowledge of resource management. Through the chemistry locked in his tissues, we see not only a life lived but also a culture deeply attuned to the land and its cycles. Experimental archaeology has complemented these studies, offering practical insight into how Ötzi lived and worked. Reproductions of his tools, clothing, and equipment have been tested in alpine conditions, demonstrating their efficiency, durability, and ingenuity. For example, recreating his copper axe revealed the skill required in early metalworking, while testing his shoes and clothing showed advanced insulation strategies suitable for extreme cold. By engaging with his material culture in this hands-on way, scientists gain a visceral sense of daily life, survival, and problem-solving, making the past tangible and emotionally resonant. The arrow in Ötzi's shoulder remains a focal point for ongoing investigation. Advanced imaging and chemical analyses have clarified the composition of the flint, the mechanics of the wound, and even the likely trajectory of the projectile. These findings continue to support the theory of deliberate, close-range violence, while also raising questions about the social dynamics that led to his death. Was it a personal vendetta, a conflict over resources, or a ritualized act within his community? Each new study adds depth to the mystery, keeping the narrative alive, suspenseful, and profoundly human. Microbiological studies have further enriched the portrait of Ötzi. Analysis of preserved stomach contents, intestines, and oral microbiota has revealed pathogens, parasites, and bacteria that afflicted him in life. The presence of Borrelia burgdorferi, the bacterium responsible for Lyme disease, suggests that ancient humans contended with microbial threats much as we do today. Similarly, evidence of gastrointestinal parasites reflects a complex interaction between environment, diet, and disease. These discoveries humanize Ötzi, reminding us that despite technological and environmental differences, the challenges of survival, illness, and adaptation are timeless. Ongoing research has also explored his social and genetic connections to contemporary populations. DNA comparisons with modern humans suggest links to groups in southern Europe, particularly regions of Italy and the Eastern Alps. This genetic continuity offers insight into migration, intermarriage, and the persistence of cultural and biological lineages over thousands of years. Ötzi, frozen in ice, thus serves as a living bridge, connecting prehistoric communities to modern descendants, reinforcing the idea that human history is a continuous thread, woven through time, place, and shared experience. Finally, the ongoing studies of Ötzi illustrate the convergence of mystery, science, and storytelling. Every new analysis, from DNA sequencing to experimental archaeology, from CT imaging to isotopic tracing, adds detail to a narrative that is as gripping as it is educational. The Iceman's story unfolds layer by layer, merging forensic rigor with cinematic drama, showing us a man who lived, traveled, fought, and ultimately died in a world both alien and familiar. Each discovery enhances our connection to him, allowing us to witness courage, ingenuity, and vulnerability across millennia. Through this continued research, Ötzi remains a dynamic figure, a time traveler whose frozen body allows us to reconstruct life in vivid detail. He is not a static relic but an evolving story, revealing insights into health, culture, technology, social structures, and the human condition. The combination of modern science and ancient preservation transforms him into both subject and storyteller, offering lessons that are practical, emotional, and profoundly human. Even thousands of years later, Ötzi continues to teach, inspire, and intrigue, reminding us that the past is never truly lost. It waits, sometimes beneath ice, sometimes in the curiosity and determination of those who seek to understand it. Theories about Ötzi's final hours often begin with one haunting question. Why was he carrying so much? His gear was not just survival equipment, it was a mobile toolkit, the kind a man takes when he doesn't expect to return home soon. His pack contained tools for mending clothes, sharpening blades, cutting wood, preparing food, and crafting weapons. Scholars believe that such extensive equipment suggests he was not on a simple hunting trip. The Alps were harsh, unpredictable, and unforgiving. No one wandered into their upper regions without purpose. The evidence points toward a deeper motive: exile, escape, or a mission that required absolute readiness. Small objects in his pouch reveal even more. Flint flakes, a bone awl, a fire-starting kit, and dried fungi with medicinal properties indicate a man who needed to treat injuries and start fires quickly. These were essentials for someone living on the edge of danger. But what truly intrigued researchers was the presence of unfinished tools. His bow, still rough and unpolished, appeared to be in the early stages of crafting. Why would a seasoned traveler begin such an important weapon while on the move? Unless he had no choice. Unless he needed a weapon urgently. Every item, every fragment, felt like a piece of a puzzle hinting at urgency, fear, or preparation for conflict. His gear was functional, but also symbolic of a man expecting hardship. Section 21 reveals that Ötzi's belongings were more than artifacts. They were warnings carved in wood and stone, whispers from a man stepping into unknown danger. And together they raise a chilling possibility. He was preparing for trouble that he already sensed approaching. Ötzi's clothing offered another layer of insight into his life and final journey. Far from primitive, his garments were sophisticated, multi-layered, and built for survival in brutal alpine conditions. He wore a grass cape designed to repel rain, a fur hat sewn tightly for warmth, leggings crafted from goat hide, and shoes stuffed with soft plant fibers for insulation. Each piece showed remarkable craftsmanship. The seams were carefully stitched, the hides chosen for durability, and the layers arranged with purpose. This was not the attire of a wandering novice. This was the clothing of a man who understood the mountains deeply and who expected a hard journey. But certain details raised new questions. His shoes were sturdy, yet the laces appeared hastily tied. His fur coat showed repairs done in a hurry, and his leggings bore patches that looked newly attached. These signs suggested that either he had been traveling for a long time, or he had been forced to leave quickly, repairing his gear on the run. Most intriguing was the presence of multiple animal types in his clothing: deer, goat, sheep, even bear. This variety pointed to a man who either had access to many skilled hunters or lived in a community with wide resource networks. A man whose social ties might have been stronger than initially believed. The final twist came from microscopic wear patterns. They showed that his boots had walked across different types of terrain within a short time frame. Forests, wetlands, rocky slopes. He was moving fast, covering vast ground, and adapting constantly. Section 22 builds a picture of a man not merely surviving the elements, but battling time itself. His clothing becomes a silent diary, each stitch a clue to urgency, danger, and a journey that was never meant to end in peace. As researchers delved deeper into Ötzi's final hours, a new layer of his story emerged. One built not on artifacts, but on movement. His path across the Alps was not random. Every step he took, every elevation he climbed, carried meaning. Scientists reconstructed his last journey through pollen traces, mineral particles, and microscopic plant fragments embedded in his clothing and digestive system. These fragments revealed that in just 48 hours, Ötzi descended into a valley, ate a full meal, and then climbed thousands of feet back up into the mountains. It was a path taken with urgency rather than routine. Something or someone was following him. His last meal, a carefully prepared combination of ibex meat, grains, and herbs, was not the meal of a man casually traveling. It had been eaten quickly, yet deliberately, as if he knew strength would be needed for what lay ahead. The terrain he crossed grew harsher with each hour. Sharp winds, thinning air, and steep rock paths surrounded him. Yet he kept going, driven by purpose or fear, perhaps both. The microscopic evidence painted a vivid picture. He paused briefly near a forest, then climbed again toward the glacier where he would ultimately fall. His final journey becomes even more haunting when paired with the weapons found beside him. He carried a nearly finished bow, still rough at the edges, as if crafted in a hurry. His copper axe, a symbol of status, remained tightly bound to him, suggesting he expected danger. Section 23 captures the image of a man on the run, climbing higher into unforgiving mountains, unaware that the ice beneath his feet would become his tomb, and his voice to the future. The wounds on Ötzi's body were not random marks of nature. They were the silent confessions of his final conflict. Forensic scans revealed deep cuts on his hands and wrists, the kind of injuries seen when someone raises their arms to block a blade. These defensive wounds suggested a struggle, perhaps a close-range fight shortly before his death. More damning was the arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder. Fired from behind, it tore through muscle and pierced a major artery. This was not a warning shot. It was a killing strike. Yet the arrow shaft had been removed, indicating the attacker, or maybe even Ötzi himself, tried to pull it out. Blood traces from multiple individuals were found on his weapons. This astonishing detail revealed he had not been alone in the hours leading to his death. There was combat, real combat, before the fatal shot. Whether he was ambushed, betrayed, or defending his people remains a mystery, but everything points to a violent confrontation. Near his body lay a copper axe, astonishingly well-crafted and rare for his era. Many researchers believe this axe may have been the reason he was targeted. In a world where status meant survival, such an item could spark envy, conflict, or even revenge. His unfinished bow tells its own story. A man preparing for danger. A man expecting enemies. A man who knew time was running out. Section 24 paints a chilling picture. Ötzi did not freeze to death by accident. He died violently, hunted, wounded, and pursued into the mountains. The glacier preserved his wounds better than any parchment or carving, allowing us to see not just how he lived, but how he fought for his life. As the mystery of Ötzi's death takes shape, Section 25 shifts from evidence to meaning, from what happened to why it matters. His body, preserved for over 5,000 years, is more than an archaeological discovery. It is a message from the depths of time, a reminder of humanity's unbroken continuity. Ötzi lived in a world without metal tools, maps, shelters, or written language, yet his struggles mirror ours. He sought safety. He protected his belongings. He faced danger. He tried to survive. His final journey becomes a symbol of the human experience. Resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The glacier that entombed him acted not as a grave, but as a time capsule. Every stitch in his clothing, every tool he carried, every wound on his body speaks across millennia. Through him, we see the fragility of life and the astonishing ability of nature to preserve a story when humans cannot. Ötzi's legacy is not just scientific. It is emotional, philosophical. He forces us to ask enduring questions. What do we leave behind? What stories survive when we are gone? How will future generations interpret our lives, our tools, our struggles? His death, once silent, now echoes through museums, documentaries, and research labs. His life, once unknown, now shapes our understanding of ancient societies, technologies, diets, migrations, and conflicts.